the
Is
meeting,
being
and so
recorded.
I've offered to record the meetings so that we can put them onto the YouTube channel, which hopefully you're all familiar with, albeit it being a very crude YouTube channel. Nonetheless, hopefully it's helpful for people being able to catch up if they're not able to join meetings such as this. However, that does mean that any conversations that we are having will be available on YouTube. So just keep that in mind. I don't think there's a massive demand for the general public to be sitting here watching Best Start meetings, but nonetheless, just be aware that that's the case. The other thing that I will struggle with a little bit, just because of the nature of WebEx, we see this as a really important opportunity to bring our facilitators together and our regional staff, and for everyone to hear what's going on across the state, because it's a very isolated role and we're really conscious that it's an isolated role in the Best Start space. But with WebEx, we can't actually see all of the people who are present in the meeting. So when we're doing introductions, for instance, if I don't call on you, please introduce yourselves, because I can see a +5. I know there's other people in the meeting, but I can't actually see them. So I'll try and get around to everybody when we're doing the intros. But if I do miss someone, please make sure that you introduce yourselves. So that's just WebEx kind of protocols. Obviously, wherever possible, if you can mute your the screen until you need to talk, but we definitely want to encourage as much conversation as possible. From my perspective, while we've sort of agreed to facilitate this meeting, it's not going to work. One thing that I'm really conscious of is that this could turn into the kind of real life equivalent of the collaboration site. So if anyone who's been around long enough and knows the collaboration site, that ended up just being me talking to myself for a long time and trying to generate conversations that no one kind of became a part of, and I understand why that happened on the collaboration site, but we don't want it repeated here. So obviously the more we really want as many conversations going as we can have, so this is an opportunity to absolutely share where you're at, what you're doing, what you've learned, the challenges, etc. And I think one of the big things around this is we acknowledge that there are sites who are potentially completely starting over. So you might have a new facilitator, you might have a completely new partnership, etc. What we don't want to have is a situation where people are afraid to say where they're at, because it's not about judgment. It is absolutely about sharing where we're at, what we're learning, the challenges. And if you are right back at the start and you're hearing the stories of people who are really doing great work and really embedding improvement science, sometimes that can be daunting. But I want to stress that these meetings are supposed to be in the spirit of improvement, and so it's not about everyone should be, no matter how well you're doing, everyone should be trying to do better anyway. It's not about judgment. So I really want to encourage people who might be at that starting point or struggling to engage partners or struggling to get people to embed an improvement science approach to their work, to not be afraid to raise any issues, to talk about the challenges that you're facing, because it's not about judgment. It's about absolutely sharing what each of us have learned along the way and working out how we can support each other. It won't work if people are only saying the great things that are happening. Conversely, if people are very keen to share all the negative things that are happening, I'm also conscious that we need to be thinking in that kind of solutions-focused mindset as well. So really thinking about how we can give each other, if people are experiencing challenges, how we can move forward on those and things that might have worked at other sites. So really encourage everybody to think in terms of that notion of support for each other, as opposed to feeling as though there's going to be any judgment associated with where you're at, because it won't work if that's what we're coming, like if we come to the table thinking that everyone's going to be in the same spot, then it won't be very effective as a meeting. So that's kind of like the background. We want to offer these sessions with a very loose agenda, because effectively we really prefer it to be facilitator driven. These meetings won't work if they are not facilitator driven. And an opportunity for you to really share where you guys are at. So today's session, we're going to look predominantly at measures and re-engaging partners, because I think that's kind of appropriate. We tested the topic ideas with our innovation sites to see if they supported the kind of notion that we thought people would want, like the topics rather, that people might want to be following throughout the year. So we've got these loose agendas based on what we think people might be struggling with at any point in the year, but we are absolutely able to change that however needed. So there's sort of at the end we'll have a sort of an other kind of section, which is absolutely where you can talk about any pressing issues that you have at your site. So what we'll do first is we will do the introductions. Frankston, I might go to you first to give you time to unmute your screen.
Hi, I'm Diane Merriweather. I'm ECPAPA. Responsible for overseeing Best Start program here at Frankston, Bayside Peninsula.
Hi, I'm Benny. I'm also performance and planning advisor. Relatively new, just joined a week.
Hello, I'm Susie Stevens and I'm the team leader for education and care down on the Mornington Peninsula.
Hi, I'm Georgina Devereaux and I'm Best Start facilitator for Frankston.
And Sue Brown, Papa, Bayside Peninsula area. Joy Mackay, ECPAPA, Bayside Peninsula area, looking after the Mornington Peninsula Shire Best Start program.
And I'm Kate Myhair, and I'm the Best Start facilitator for Mornington Peninsula, and this is my 6th week. Yes.
The technology is finally working for you, because I know you tried to join in our other couple of meetings, and we just had some issues with WebEx meetings that had been sent out earlier than I think sort of the start of the year. There seemed to be some kind of problem with, so I was really worried about today, but it seems like most people have been able to get on, so that is a relief. So Greensborough, another nice full room in Greensborough.
Hear us? Yeah. Okay, well I'll go first. I'm Bianca Fitzgerald. I'm the ECPAPA for the NEMA area. I'm Sue Malone. I'm the Best Start facilitator at Nillumbik.
Michelle Ryland, I'm the Best Start facilitator at Whittlesea. Kelly Brand, Best Start facilitator for Hume. Michelle Andrews, ECPAPA for Hume area.
Janaea Castamedas, Aboriginal Best Start project officer.
Tennille, Aboriginal Best Start project officer from Baxell.
Mr. 3.
It's great to see you guys joining us as well. We'll talk more about the Baxell role in supporting both the mainstream sites and the Aboriginal Best Start sites. Toward the end of the meeting, we'll touch on that a little bit more, but it's great to see you guys being able to be part of the meeting, so thank you for joining us. Glenn Waverley.
Hi, Carly Mawson, Best Start facilitator for the Yarra Ranges Council.
Anita Salantia, ECPAPA for the Outer East.
Nice. Maybe go to Moe now.
Do we have to mute on anything?
Dandenong, do we have anyone?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Oh, hello, Leah. Hey, we'll go to Dandenong. Oh, no, okay, you guys.
We're here.
Unmuted now. Sorry, go.
Alison Ferguson, Ramiak Aboriginal Corporation.
I'm Kylie Pollard. I'm South Coast Best Start facilitator. That's Bass Coast and South Gippsland.
And I'm Sarah McAllister, one of the Latrobe Best Start facilitators here in Gippsland.
And Josh Booth, the other Best Start facilitator in Latrobe.
You guys are flying about to
I think you're still in it.
what to mute? Is that the go? Like you just have to go up and mute your screen in Moe. Is there a papa in the room?
No,
that's fine. Yeah.
I think that, the role's unfilled at the moment, I believe.
Okay, yeah, cool. Awesome. Okay, so we may as well go to Dandenong now.
Okay, we've got 3 of us in Dandenong. Hello. It's Patricia. I'm an ECPAPA in the southern Melbourne area.
Leah Taylor, City of Casey, Best Start.
And Kelly Muratana, City of Greater Dandenong, Best Start Community Facilitator.
Hi.
Great.
And Sale.
Hi, Carmel Berger, the ECPAPA for Outer Gippsland.
And I'm Raquel Mayman, the Best Start facilitator for Wellington.
You guys have to leave early, I think.
Yeah, sorry, we do.
No, that's
Because we've got a Best Start meeting.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm not certain, like I'm not really necessarily thinking it'll be 3 hours, but we just want to limit it. If people want to have a really, robust conversation, then this is a great opportunity to do so. So if it lasts 3 hours, it lasts 3 hours, and if it lasts 2, then so be it. Everyone gets an hour back in their day. So we will go to Shepparton now.
Chiwakawera, early childhood Kappa in Goulburn. Hi everyone, Belinda Whitelaw, Best Start Facilitator for Greater Shepparton.
Ballarat.
Hi everybody, Tessa Beachy, Papa for Central Highlands.
Chrissy Austin, Best Start at the City of Ballarat. And also Jane Gardner, Best Start Facilitator from Moorabool. I can't see us up there, but we're here.
We can see you.
Okay.
It's the beauty of this, you don't get to see yourself, which is probably a great thing, really, especially for us because we're going to be talking a lot. So, and what's great, I think, might be another office on this side.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
I'm Patrick Falk, Ek Papa, Wyndham, Hobsons Bay and Melbourne, LGS.
Hi, I'm Lyndall. I'm from Wyndham City Council. Project
But you did that.
Hi everyone, I'm Georgia. I'm the Best Start Program Leader at Maribyrnong Council.
Excellent. Good to see you guys. Kilo.
Good morning. Fiona Norman, Ek Papa for Bringbank Melton. Karen Curzon from Melton's an apology. And we've got...
I'm Michael Riley, Acting Best Start Facilitator at Brimbank.
Excellent. And I think Fiona is on the line.
Yes, hello. Sorry, I don't have my video on because it sort of doesn't really work when I'm at my desk. It'll just be my profile, which is a bit awkward. Hello, I'm Fiona Downey. I'm in the central office of the department. As Senior Project Officer, I work on early years management and also Best Start.
And I think Robinvale might also be another site that I've missed.
We're up here, Rachel. So Beth Burgess, the Ek Papa for Mallee, and I oversee the Best Start programs in Mildura and Robinvale, and we are coming to you from Robinvale today.
Hi, Anna Kilpatrick, and I'm one of the 2 Best Start facilitators here in Robinvale.
And Sam from Mildura Best Start will be joining us. She's just a little bit late.
Yeah, sure. Have I missed anybody?
We're in
Barwon.
Rachel.
What was that, sorry?
Yeah, Barwon.
Barwon, okay, sorry. Couldn't see you guys.
Right, so Catherine Ek Papa Barwon.
Andrea Demeray, Ek Papa.
Chantal Lucas Crane, the Aboriginal Best Start Facilitator here in Geelong on Wadawurrung land.
And Shona Murphy, Best Start Facilitator with City of Greater Geelong.
Excellent. Do you want to introduce?
Yeah. Hi, Michelle from Coolum, and I'm the Aboriginal Best Start Facilitator in Horsham.
And having some major wins in this space,
Yes.
which has been great over the past 2.5 years. I will often refer to the work that is being done in Dalkaya because where they have come from 2.5 years ago to where they are at now is just worlds apart. And so if Michelle doesn't sing her praises enough, then it's possible that I will possibly add in some of the impact that's been had, because it's been an amazing ride in this area using this improvement approach. So is there anybody else? There seems to be a call-in user that I hasn't
Hi,
introduced.
Rachel, it's Marie Parker from Shire.
Hey, how you going?
Good, thank you.
That's good. And I've just got a message. Okay. And we'll also have the Bendigo office joining us as well when the facilitators arrive. So they're not quite there yet. All right, so I guess now we've sort of done the introductions. I'm pretty certain we've kind of covered everybody. Now is the opportunity really where we want to start looking at measures and talking about potential measures that people are using. And so just to give a little bit of an intro to that from our perspective, we know that the use of monthly measures has been really helpful for some sites to really energise the partners, and we would encourage people to be looking at monthly measures this year. And so this is an opportunity really to talk about the things that you've learnt from your 2019 experience and the things, what you're potentially going to be looking at this year as well. So what I might do is I might, in the first instance, throw to a couple of officers just to get some input from, sort of what has happened at your particular site. So we might start at the Greensborough office on this one, because I know there's a lot of sites there, just to get your experience around measures and have that opportunity to kind of talk through what you guys are doing at this point.
We just want to know why we drew the short straw.
Because there are so many of you in that room, Callie. I think it's delightful, and why not pick on you, really?
Right, Sue, Michelle. In terms of what I learned then at Nillumbik, we decided at the end of last year to change our logic model, which is what we've been working on, because for a number of reasons it didn't work. It probably wasn't specific enough. It was very reliant on data from other people. And there were so many changes of staff just within the organisation that it kind of made it quite difficult. I mean, the flip side, we still did manage to do a number of PDSAs, but in some ways it was a bit hit and miss as well. So we've been focusing, which is kind of why I haven't finished doing the logical model for this year. We've really focused on making it as specific as possible and thinking through things much more, like even down to the survey questions we're asking. Are they really going to answer what we want to know, and those things? So that's where we're at.
It's a good point around the survey questions, I think, because it's real. I mean, I do think it's a real art form to be able to write survey questions that elicit the responses that are actually useful. I think that you could potentially do PhDs in it and still not get it right, and that's a really big challenge, I think, for all of our Best Start sites. So it's interesting, and I think that's where moving away from surveys as measurement is kind of helpful in a way, because at least we're not reliant on surveys being the be all and end all, but you do want it from an information perspective around what can drive your partnership work a whole lot more.
Yeah, well, we had a lot of discussion about what would work in terms of the surveys, and so the partners were they were the ones that said they wanted it only twice a year. I am just in the process of changing a couple of questions, because we'd left a couple as free text, thinking people can put their own responses in. But then one or two of the childcare centres are going, no way, the staff just won't respond to that. They'll just, you're better with a kind of tick box thing. So,
really?
Yeah. So I figure, they know their staff, so maybe I just need a bit more of a balance, but yeah.
Can you still keep it in, but just have it that you can skip that question?
Yeah, I didn't really want to skip though, because I think that's the easiest thing to do, would just skip through, and I've really cut down the number of questions being asked anyway. So no, it might just need me to think what kind of things might they say, and preempt that way. But, so it's work in progress.
Yeah. And you actually just the point that you raised about the twice a year surveys, just to highlight that from a portal perspective, there's no easy way to do that. You can't set up a survey question to be asked in 2 periods. You have to, if you're going to do a survey like that, I think you guys use that, don't you? That you have to have it per cycle, So you're doing it on a quarterly basis, but you're only entering the data in that biannual kind of way. But it just means that from a chart perspective, you're always going to have sort of 0 values for the 2 other quarters. So it's just keeping in mind that that is a limitation of the portal. You're going to have to, if you're going to do those biannual questions, it will, you really do have to set it up as an annual thing per cycle. So,
yeah. I think at Whittlesea, I'm still sort of learning a lot about the portal and the data and the measures and everything. I have been there for a little while, but I'm still learning a lot of that. I think with the measures, it's looking at, I'm trying to look at specific measures this year especially for ESC and a lot of local data entry, I think. We'll be putting out surveys, but I think like Sue, making them twice a year rather than the 4 times a year, because I don't think the services, I think they get overwhelmed by too much information all the time. So I think that we'll probably look at twice a year as well. And then also entering a lot of local data entry for measures as well. So, but like I said, I'm still learning a lot of that. Sue's helping me a lot with understanding how to put data in and how to put, to set up all the dashboard and everything like that as well. So, and just looking on the debt portal as well, the demo, I think is really helpful. Yeah. So, sort of working my way through that and figuring out what's important and what I can actually use to measure, to make useful measures rather than just putting in information for no reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think there's sort of this danger in having huge number of measures, because you've got to think for what purpose.
Yeah.
Is it really going to enhance the work of the partnership? Is it really going to drive the work of the partnership if you have 20 measures as opposed to if you have 2 really meaningful measures that you can really focus on and really continue to drive that conversation? So I think it's it's a good thing to consider. When it comes to the surveys that you're going to do biannually, do you have any sense of when you're going to, like, which quarters you would do those in? Have you given much thought to that at this point?
I think maybe with mine, because I haven't sat down and done, a lot of the survey stuff yet, and March is already coming.
Yep.
It will most likely be June and the end of the year.
Yeah, okay.
But if I'd prefer to do March, and then I think that would work better rather than, because the end of the year everyone gets too busy and they won't want to do surveys. So really, I'd prefer, I think, to do March and September.
So that's like from the portal's perspective, you don't have to have entered it like your data. So if you can't quite do it before the end of March, for instance, you can send it out in the next quarter. You know what I mean? So it could still display in March. So you could do it right at the start of April, but it actually displays in March. So up to you. But just to let you know that from a portal perspective. So
yeah, because that would work well for me, I think, to do it like that.
Yeah, excellent.
I've spent quite a bit of time understanding what data is collected across the sector. So from our partners, like what data do they collect? And we're sort of working on developing our own data strategy, local data strategy, because our children's services across Hume and MCH and Child First, they collect a lot of data. So rather than reinventing the wheel, understanding what they are collecting and how we might use that. But I think one of my learnings around the data is really the analysis of the data. And I think that's quite an expert field to really sit down and analyse and summarise your data and understand the context that sits around your data. So, I'm really fortunate in Hume in that I have really good support in our research and engagement team, and as an innovation site working with Lauren at MCRI, because she is fantastic at looking at the data and really drilling down in it. And I think that's really important, to not just, just to take it for what it is. But when you're looking at a run chart and go, oh, yeah, did this from June to July or from July to September or whatever, but really understanding the context that sits around that and what the influencers are, or, you know, the enablers or the barriers, or, you know, it's the discussion that sits around your measures that's really important.
Yeah, that's exactly, I think that's such a good point, because that's where having so many measures can be really detrimental. I think you touched on another thing too around not reinventing the wheel around data collection. Yeah, absolutely don't. You want to be able to work out existing data sources. But I think when you only have a couple of really simple measures, that makes for that conversation. You can do a much deeper dive into the conversation around the data and why things have changed. Like if you are talking about ESK data, for instance, and you've seen because you're focusing on that and you've seen a big increase, well, you know, this is an opportunity to have a conversation around that. Similarly, if you've had a decrease, you know, in the numbers over the month, you know, what was the cause of that? Or if you're talking about attendance, what could be the, you know, the issues around attendance, and, you know, being able to have that really deep conversation around it, I think is, it's, by not having too many measures, it actually allows you to do it. But the other thing around the run charts as well, and I know for those of you who joined the portal session, you know that I did touch on it, and I think I sent out the information around the interpreting a run chart, for instance, but there's a really specific science around it to do it properly, you know, and so if you're going to do it properly, the portal does allow you to enter in your median line, which is really important for interpreting run charts. But for most people, that might be a little bit too complex at this point in time. And so while you're familiarising yourself with using data, that's okay. But if you can set a target and work toward that target, then that's a good starting point when you're starting to bring partners along. Once you get to the more scientific part of it, then that's potentially an opportunity at that point to start bringing in your median line and working out whether you've had a genuine improvement because you are working out, you know, how many points are up the line or whatever, and applying the rules that you need to apply for a run chart. So I think from that perspective,
I agree, because I think with a run chart, you know, you have to have a lot of points on your run chart to then start making some judgments, if you like, around what's happening. And I think that's what we've got to be really careful of, that we're making assumptions
that's right.
That are based on very small sample sizes often. So, you know, that's, there's a risk there.
Absolutely. And it's why we moved away from surveys as a measurement tool, because if you've only got 4 collection points, and that's if you're really over surveying, we know all the limitations that existed around doing quarterly surveys in the first place, let alone the science didn't support it either, you know. So it was a really big challenge, and so that's where we really had to move away from survey questions as a way of measuring, because it gives you a nice kind of indicator. So, you know, when you're doing surveys and you want to see that there's been movement, you can do those surveys biannually, for instance, and find that there has been movement, but you have to be really careful because it is the assumptions you're making, not genuinely being able to identify improvement. So that's a really important distinction to make. Around interpreting that data. Yeah, that's good. Did you want to add some stuff, Michelle?
Just around the surveys, I've actually mapped how I do that now. So I do services 1st and 3rd term, and parents 2nd and 4th, because what I look at is how the service is starting at the start of the year. They obviously do some PDSAs and change ideas. So 2nd term, we survey to see if the parents have noticed any change or what level they think the service is at. 3rd term, we see where the teachers are again, or MCH, and then get the parents to survey term 4. And I found exactly what you guys were saying is if you over survey, a lot of the time it becomes, they're just ticking the box, some services, just to get the survey done, but we want genuine information. So it's better to actually do it that twice a year, I think, too. I also made sure this year that my questions related strictly to what my short-term outcomes were in our logic model. So there's no point surveying parents if the feedback or services, the feedback we get don't actually help us measure our short-term outcomes. So I actually emailed Rachel and said, I think I've been a bit blunt in my questions, but it was actually, I've cut the fluffy stuff out a lot and left questions that are actually going to be able to measure for us against our logic model. So, and same as you guys, I've reduced my questions to 5 or 6. So really limited them, made sure that I can actually look at that logic model and look at a question on the survey, and that question is relating to something on the logic model to give me a measure. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm thinking maybe we can go to the Dandenong office now.
Take it away.
No, you can take it away.
You can take it away.
So, where are we starting? Just what we're doing with measures and how we're...
exactly. What you've learnt from 2019, basically, and I guess the way forward for you as well, like, how you intend to apply that learning in what you're going to do this year.
Yeah. I think the point about measurement knowledge and measurement theory that's already been made is a really good one, because I found that for me, the most time last year was really working hard at getting our measures implementation plan and our measures right. And I'm still working on that for this year in relation to who can collect, how is it going, what are we actually going to collect, and who is our target audience. So I concur that a lot of time and a big piece of our work is to try and get the measures right. And then it informs, for me, it's informing the baseline to move forward into this year. So, so even though we've moved target site at Casey, we will be bringing along our median measurement from last year to use as the starting point for our measures this year. I also concur that measurement can become too big, and we measured 4 monthly measures last year, and some of them were across 14 rooms, and it was just too much data. It was ridiculous. But in saying that, I did find that it brought buy-in with the partners, and it's brought a whole lot of discussions about learning in what we're seeing and trying to really unpack what the data is telling us. So for Casey, we have kept the attendance measure, but someone asked off the side cuff, is it difficult to collect? Yes, it is. Some educators, have found, well, generally once it started, I got most sites giving me the monthly attendance data, but it still takes time to set up Excel spreadsheets and how they're going to get the data from the site to you in a monthly way, all of that exciting stuff. But yeah, it kind of worked. And the DNA, the do not attends, was another thing we were measuring, but with the move across to CEDAS, that's become a new challenge for people to try and understand systems and pulling that data out. And we're also measuring time it takes for late registered children to arrive at the kindergarten door, because we feel that that will bring up a lot of learning around systems and processes where there can be improvement. So some of the grappling questions we've had around measurement with that has been, do we want to collect at the point of being offered a kindergarten, or do we want to collect at the point where the child is registering for kindergarten, and where's the start point, where's the end point, and who's the audience? But we've finally got some movement on that, and that's really exciting because it means we'll have a median of a certain amount of days from last year that we'll try and improve.
This is a matter of interest. What was your median?
So our stretch goal was 14 days inclusive of weekends, because it becomes very hard to take out weekends, but not inclusive of school holidays. So we will be, our median was 16, and but we had some really bad case examples of a lot longer, and they were great for the improvement team to think about. So it's not a huge amount of difference or a massive stretch goal this year to kind of keep it at that, but what it is doing is it's making us break down the processes of why some children find it hard. Does it sit with some of the parent responsibility? Does it sit with, our portal, our processes? So that's been a really meaty measure, and one we wanted to keep.
And full credit to you on that one, because that, I think I've shared it with most people across the state as a potential measure to use, because I just think it's genius. And because we talk so often in terms of referrals and referral pathways, etc. And it's really hard to get a measure that genuinely, like, it's great to have, you can count the number of referrals, for instance, but does that mean that the kids are going to go and actually attend the service? And so to have that kind of a measure, I think exactly what you were saying then is just so important, because it's not only that you've got some data, which is great, but it's those conversations around those kids that blow out, because that's when you can work out where everybody can influence the process. And that's just huge. And to take that learning, and as you obviously used it in your improvement teams to have those.
And this is how complex measurement can get, because, in a growth corridor, you're like, which kinder has spaces and what population do we measure? But also on top of that became, where's the steps in the process? So in actual fact, we've actually got 2 measures this year where we'll be collecting from registration to offer and how long that takes. So a late child arrives into Cranbourne, new to the area, how long before they register for kinder and an offer is made. But that will be behind the scenes and give me a baseline potentially for next year, because if that blows out, that tells us that's the area we want to look at. And then we'll measure from offer to front door, and that will give us a different picture of, whether there's processes and difficulties there. So it has been good to develop that one, and I've got lots of buy-in, and the improvement team are really keen on that one. I have been challenged with the service collaboration, and I even though we're talking about surveys being difficult, I really nutted and found it difficult to think. The partnership were really keen to want better coordination and collaboration. They want better relationships between services, but how do we measure that monthly? So I also was able to check in with MCRI and say, well, how do we measure service collaboration? And coordination, I think we all struggle with that. I'm going to test this year doing a monthly survey to a certain sample of partners, where they'll just answer on a 1 to 10 scale my relationship with maternal and child health, my relationship with kindergarten, and my relationship with supported play group. And my hope is that we'll send out a survey and get a bit of a baseline, and we'll work to improve the average score across the months, but I'll only choose a cohort of, and as you say, that grid will really help Dalkaya in relation to who I ask, every month around what your relationship is like. But hopefully if we find one particular sector has a really, low score, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s out of 10s, it'll give us the impetus of where to focus our work. It's not great to have to go back to survey, but I really struggle with it. But if you're doing,
exactly. And I think that's exactly right. It's one of those things that you might find that people end up kind of doing almost a proxy measure for that particular short-term outcome area where you are, not necessarily a proxy measure, but you're knowing the science will ultimately be imperfect because you can only do quarterly surveys using the portal, for instance, and that might be like an indicator kind of measure as opposed to a measure of improvement, but that might be what you're stuck with for that particular short-term outcome area. But being able to do it on a monthly basis, obviously that's going to be completely different from your perspective, because you will be looking at it very much from you will have enough points to be able to do a proper run chart and to see where you've got the improvement.
Yeah, and I'm hoping the 1 to 10 will give enough variation, with 1 being I know the service but have no relationship, versus 10 I refer families into that service. We'll get a bit of a general score, to improve on. But it really is a test, but it's being driven by the partnership, because that's what's important to them. It's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see whether it works as a monthly measure and how it goes. But yeah, that's measurement. Measurement here. Casey, sorry.
No, it's good. Greater Dandenong, we started big, very big, almost too big. And so the challenge for us has been just bringing it back down to being a little bit more targeted, which is always a challenge because everyone out here likes to work big and just be, hammering stuff. So that has been a real hard thing to do. The surveying probably, which I think everyone's experienced, has not necessarily been helpful in terms of actually measuring stuff, but what it has told us is the gaps or the stories where families have had the opportunity to say, the service wasn't that great, or the service was really awesome, and you need to do X, Y, Z. So that's probably been the benefit of having the surveys. We've probably, touch wood, been lucky that we've had some uptake with the surveys. Services maybe not so engaging. MCH has been really great in terms of getting those surveys back to us, and so I've been happy about that. But yeah, with the earliest services, it's been a little bit hard to have those relationships. One of the challenges which I think everybody's had, is the change in staffing. So often what starts as a really good relationship and potential work either comes to a screaming halt because either someone's become very ill and has had to, leave, or staffing restructuring, or whatever the case may be. And so that point of engagement is lost, and you sort of have to start having the same conversation, start again, and try to get the buy-in. So in terms of measurement, I hate it.
I know.
But, I just want to see the end results. But I think, like Kelly mentioned earlier on, I think, which is a hard thing, is that measurement needs to tell a story, and in order to see some numbers, if you're not necessarily data driven, which I'm not, it's really hard to understand what that number means. If it's a big number, it could also mean that you're actually really bad at it, or it could also mean you're doing really well. But if you don't actually know the background or the context, and you don't know how to analyse it, it can be really problematic in actually getting anywhere. So I think for me, I'm lucky, I guess I've been in the Best Start world for a wee while now, so it's still overwhelming. So for our new facilitators, I think this would be incredibly big.
Yeah, exactly. I agree completely on that. I think it's and I think that's something, just to, again, going back to that spirit of not being in a judgment space, that we acknowledge that this is a lot. The facilitator role is such a complex role, and there are so many dimensions to it, and the more you know, the more you realise you don't know. And I think that's really overwhelming. Like, it really is overwhelming. And I think just I guess another reminder, it's a really good point in the conversation to issue that reminder again. If you are feeling overwhelmed, it's okay, because it is a little bit overwhelming. You know what I mean? Like, it absolutely is. But this is about trying to find some ideas that you might be able to take away from these conversations that you can use. Like, it might be just one small snippet, like you might like Leah's attendance idea, and you want to, or whatever it might be. That you can just take away a snippet and apply it in your context, because it is overwhelming. Like, when you listen to everybody across the state and where everybody's at, if you are at a point where you're not using measurement, for instance, then it can feel like, oh my God, I haven't done it yet. And what am I doing? And we don't want that.
That's actually okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How do you go, because you've had traditionally a really, really strong early years partnership. And you've been the facilitator all the way along. And so it's very difficult when you have such a strong, as you were saying before, that really big kind of focus. Have you been able to get them down to the more narrow focus yet? Or is that still a work in progress, do you think?
I think that's definitely still a work in progress, but we've made some big changes, I think, in that we had our, this is how good it is. We had our first meeting on Thursday. I wasn't even there, and it still went. So that that's really good. And Patricia was there, and but we still managed to, because we needed to nut out the logic model, because we managed to get that sort of in a draft format in December. Because it needed to be reviewed. So it was put out again to try to finalise it. I did some surveying with community partners to find out where their headspace and where their service delivery was going to be for 2020. So then we could actually just kind of get a picture of where we could actually maybe leverage some buy-in for actually some of this work. And so I believe, according to the notes and the feedback that I've received, that we've come to a place of once upon a time it was all of municipality. Now we've actually got like two sites to actually look at. So rather than being big picture, we've come back down again. So I think 2020 is going to be a bit of a better year for us, and to be able to be a little bit more targeted. And Leah gave me some good feedback around the draft logic model in terms of the natural fact, my short-term strategies, and I think I had like three Leah said, oh, you realise you've got like 3 measures just there. And I'm like, oh, crap.
But that's it. It's narrowing it down.
So, yeah, no, I think we're getting there, but the measurement thing is just such an art and a science in itself.
Absolutely.
That what you start out with, what you think you're doing, can actually unpack into such defined things. So the PDSA work is actually probably the good part, that you actually get to unpack it and take it right down. So
exactly, yeah. That's, I think what's really interesting is, consistently that notion that less is more in a Best Start context, because there's so much going on, like in terms of to do the work well, you've got to do a whole lot of measures and PDSAs and, like testing things. And as you say, like, Leah, when you were saying you have like this background measure that you're going to be monitoring, that's great. But if you put that to the partnership, that could be really overwhelming. And, you've got this big balance of things that you're trying to sort of juggle. And the more that people actually are exposed to, additional measures, etc., sometimes that can actually be detrimental. You're not getting the work done because it's too overwhelming and it feels like too much. And I think that's one of the things that, as we go further into, like, because obviously when we first implemented, like if you think back to that 2.5 years ago when we first implemented this approach and how different Best Start, like you would be looking now at your sites and even compared with what the training suggested at the time, it's very, very different now because we've learnt so much in terms of what works. And so it's just like this big evolution of things that are happening. But the thing that seems to be consistent is that less is definitely more, and you're actually more likely to have far more impact if you are really narrow in your number of measures or your number of strategies or short-term outcome areas that you're focusing in on. That can make a really big difference. So
fingers crossed for 2020.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's good. Might go to Shepparton now.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Yep, great. So I'm just thinking about our learnings from 2019, probably just to step away from measurement at the moment. One thing that probably we found, I think, as a site last year, or one of the challenges was particularly around with a couple of our PDSAs, as we tried to scale up some of those activities. We actually found it quite difficult to embed that within existing resources or hours. So I guess an example of that was with our maternal and child health service and our nurses identifying Aboriginal children who were eligible for early start to kindergarten. Started with 1 centre, 13 children, scaled it up to 3 centres. I think it was about 33 children. Tried to do it across the whole service, which was 98 children. And just encountered difficulties in the nurses able to do that within their existing hours, I guess, especially for our Rumbalara MCH service, which is Indigenous specific. So they obviously had a large number and proportion of children. I think it was around about 35 or so. And that Indigenous nurse works 1 day a week. So that created some challenges for us. And again, when we tried to do it for at-risk children within MCH, so we use a vulnerability tool in Greater Shepparton. A nurse just for 1 centre looked up those with the little teddy icon that denotes an at-risk, and looked for involvement with child protection or child first, and then went about contacting those families to let them know about ESK, scaled it up to another few, and found the increase in numbers again posed that challenge in, well, how do we fit this in within our existing hours? So, and that's something I put in our annual report for last year as well.
I think it's a really good point around PDSAs in general, that often, like you may find things that do work to a point, but that's an important learning too. Even if you can't do it for everybody, even if you are doing it for X number of children, then that's great. So what can you learn from doing that? I think, but it is sometimes difficult to actually be able to embed it across the entire service system, because you just don't have the resources, and that's an absolute limitation, and it's good to acknowledge that, rather than assume that just because it worked for 3 services, that it's going to be able to be scaled up, because it might not be able to. So.
And can I just say, it's Kelly from Greensboro. Can I just say something on Belinda, because particularly with MCH, where their appointment times are very scheduled, and they have quite, in terms of their numbers that they have to, it's a bit of a churn, if you like, for MCH. We've found the same in Hume with some of our PDSAs, where it's fine to work in 1 or 2 centres, the numbers are manageable, but as soon as you scale up to bigger centres, it becomes unmanageable for the resources that MCH currently have. And particularly, I think Leah would know this, particularly in the growth corridors, you know, the number of birth notices, the priority is on seeing families that have just given birth. And when it comes to actually doing your CAS visits further down, or further, you know, that extra identifying families or following up DNAs or whatever, that's just not a priority for MCH. So, you know, our work with MCH really has to align with where they're at as well, and rather than asking them to have an additional priority, if you like. That's
exactly right. I think that's really key, and I think you know, that's where it's good that you've got the flexibility from a Best Start perspective to say we can acknowledge that, and so you might not be focusing in on the 2-year, 3.5-year key ages and stages, because it just might not be possible. Like they might not have capacity to increase that. So if you can just focus in on one, or you know, whether it is that being able to refer into you know, the ESK kids, whatever, but it's just that notion of sometimes having to be smaller, because you know that they are absolutely under the pump, and you're not going to have any capacity.
But I guess, Rachel, what, you know, like I'm hearing Belinda talking about this in Shepparton, and I think other Best Start facilitators been nodding their heads, and we're capturing that in our annual reports. How's that being fed and informing the sector, I guess, in terms of MCH? Because this is, you know, this is what's actually happening on the ground, but we don't see, you know, the resources that have increased in MCH haven't really sort of made a difference to, you know, improving practice. So I just wonder how our learnings are informing the broader context.
Currently, we're not coordinating that at all. It's important that we know them so that we can in future, but at the moment, being completely honest, we are not currently working with DHHS to inform central policy, and largely that's because we don't have, there's not people on the ground in DHHS at the moment, as you would know, that are supporting our sites, and so we don't have that in at the minute. But I think it's really important that we continue to gather this information so that when we can, there is an opportunity to do that. But at the moment, it's not something that we're doing, and I think that's across the board with Best Start. I think we are looking at ways to improve the way that we do that centrally, because we're not doing it currently very well.
Sorry, can I just cut in? Sorry, I'm aware others haven't had a go, but one way I've tried to grapple that is to, I find the IHI website really good. This is my little plug for the IHI website. But for me, in a growth corridor, it's been about efficiencies. So it's going back to the service, and the reason we're measuring do not attend is because, like, as you say, Kelly, in a stretch service, there's not going to be a whole lot of practice changes in limited time that people can do, but I can sell Best Start in relation to saying the better our do not attend rate is, the more then that we've got appointments times available for our most vulnerable families. Or it might be about scheduling, or, you know, there's some stuff on the IHI website that excited me in relation to stretched services. How do we value add as far as Best Start goes in thinking about the measures or the language we want to use? And that's why we chose do not attend, because it's an efficiency measure rather than a measure that's asking a stretched service to fit more in. So that's, for me, the buy-in.
That's a great strategy.
Yeah.
I'll mute myself now.
Oh, no, you just want to.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Kelly, because that was probably my next point I was going to make, that the partnership, you know, as part of the undertaking of PDSAs and the learnings that we have from them. You know, the partnership and early years reference group really sees themselves as having a strong advocacy and lobbying role as well. So we need to be, you know, feeding this back. So we've been able to, you know, we're kind of saying we've been able to demonstrate some really promising work here, but if you want it to continue, or if we want to see it continuing across the whole service system, the reality is there needs to be additional resources or funding to do that. So,
but also this is what I do love about this approach, because you are using an approach that allows you to build that evidence, as opposed to just kind of talking about a gut feel, or, you know, the nurse saying repeatedly we are overworked, which we know is absolutely true. But to have that evidence base is huge, because I think this is what strengthens that advocacy position, because you can say, we could do it, we couldn't do it, we're going to do it to a point. So if you do want to have those, you know, the change, we've got the evidence here that says we cannot do it beyond this. And so I think that's what is really helpful across the board, from a Best Start perspective, that you have that opportunity to build the evidence that does strengthen the advocacy. So more than, you know, traditionally, you know what I mean? Like might have had previously. So
yeah, absolutely. What else did I want? Oh, I want to say I thought the gallery is really good on the portal to look at, and just to see what others are doing, that, you know, not having to reinvent the wheel all the time, or just reading through and thinking, you know, that's a really great idea to look at replicating that at our site. Last year we found, with our site, we actually have a particular focus on a geographical community, because we found in the past, trying to do something across the whole municipality, you know, you spread yourself really, really thin instead of getting depth. So we have 1 to 2 focus communities, and last year I found mini meetings with the MCH teams and also the kinder teams in those areas was really valuable in not only exploring their data and probably having some very honest and sometimes difficult or sensitive conversations around what that data is telling us and why it may look like that, but then also generating those change ideas for PDSAs that come from that. Surveys, I have to say I was very, very pleased to hear that we don't have to do quarterly surveys anymore. But having said that, so this year we're just going to do it in term 2, and the reason we've picked term 2 is we've actually had good buy from services and families to complete that. But yes, it hasn't really been a measurement. We've used it to look at it and say, well, here's some potential concerns or gaps, and what change ideas or PDSAs we could do from there. And I agree, you absolutely need to link the questions to the short-term outcome areas that you are looking at. And we've deleted quite a lot of questions as well.
Can I just one more thing, because about the happiness of losing the survey. I just wanted to say we kind of give you guys mixed messages as well, and I apologise for that, because we say, like, on one hand it was like don't focus on it, and then in the self-reflection tool it was like tell us how well you're doing in surveying. So acknowledge that is actually a contradiction really, and from an ECPAPA perspective we should be looking at it from, rather than saying how many surveys, or are you doing it regularly, etc. It's more around, is the surveying, proper for your site? You know what I mean? Like, is it the way that it should be to inform your local picture? Is it telling you exactly what's going on? And so that's really more what we should be looking at now. But we definitely did give mixed messaging in the self-reflection tool, so I just wanted to acknowledge that. I will also touch on the self-reflection tool later, because we're looking at something completely different for this, well, not completely different, a little bit different for this year, but we'll talk about that later. So yeah, sorry, continue.
No, and probably just one more thing, I think, from us just looking at, the data that we have been collecting and the measurements. I think that, when you do probably that deep dive or looking further into data sets, generates further discussion or actually brings up another area that maybe we need to look at or unpack. So an example has been, we've done a lot of work with trying to increase our ESK enrolments the last couple of years, particularly for our Aboriginal children. And the good news is we have had a significant increase since 2017 with our ESK enrolments, but then what we have just found out is that we've had 13 or 15 Aboriginal children actually withdraw last year from ESK. So that then has, you know, generated a whole nother discussion around, well, one, why are these children withdrawing? Two, you know, whose responsibility is it, or where does the responsibility sit to ensure, just say if some of these children have moved out of the area, that they are actually linked into another service in the municipality that they are now living, or if they've, you know, moved from a different area within the municipality, how are we ensuring that they're linked into another service? So yeah, that's been interesting for me anyway. Once you know, you can tick the box and say, yes, great job for us, but we're actually losing 15 halfway through the year. So, and is that partly something to do with the information that's initially provided with families and that they're not understanding it? Or so it's another.
And that's perfect. I think that just really demonstrates the power of measures in the first place, because if you're not collecting it, you can't dive into it to work out that that's what's happening, you know. And so, and it is that it just does prompt so many questions around why is that happening and what can you do as a partnership to address it. And it allows people to have the buy-in, because they're the people who will have the answers, potentially, or at least the theories. And then, you know, that does feed into your next logic model and, you know, whatever you're going to focus on for the rest of the year or for next year, whatever it might be. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Do you have a relationship with your, I don't know if you have crew preschool systems or CESOs?
Yes. Yeah. So our CESO is a very active member of our liaise reference group, and that's, I was just about to say, I think that's probably one of the benefits, you know, when you have the right people sitting around the table. And I have to say, in Greater Shepparton, we're very lucky. Best Start, that Council's the fund holder. Now, Council also operates the MCH service and central enrolment for kinder. So I actually have easy access to, you know, two very important data sets and systems there. We have a great relationship with the department, the CESO. So around that table, when we're presenting data, people are able to, you know, overlay it with their own information from their agency and bring a different perspective, or say, hang on a sec, this lot is telling us this, but this is what else we've got to consider as well. So yeah, that's been really, really good and important. But yeah, Brett has been great, our local CESO, and being able to, you know, be forthcoming with some of that information as well.
But I think what it has also highlighted for us and the DET is that our services actually aren't telling us that the children have withdrawn. So we actually didn't, and you know, so that's a really good learning for us. So we're actually going to do a little bit of work with all the services at the start of the year, because they don't understand that, you know, no, you won't actually lose your funding. You know, you don't have to return that ESK funding. You can use it to build your capacity or what have you. But I think because we didn't find out, I think there was 6 or 7 children we didn't find out that had withdrawn from one service, Aboriginal children from one service, till it would have been about September. You know, some had gone earlier in the year, they just hadn't told us. So, and we don't know. You know, we don't go and everybody is saying, oh, hang on, you know, your kids with how many have withdrawn, but it is just something that we as GT have to.
I think
what a learning.
That's a really important point as well, because often at papas we sit in the Best Start space thinking in terms of monitoring, supporting our Best Start sites, because that's theoretically our role. But we also have in the Best Start context, we absolutely have a role to play in changing our own practice and working out what tweaks we can make in our practice. So whether it is around, let's see if we present to these services and does that have a different, is there going to be a different outcome this time? What can we do as well? So it's not just that we are coming to just listen to partnership meetings. We absolutely have a role to play because we are part of the service system, and increasingly so, especially with the implementation of branches. We are absolutely in a key position to be able to test some changes in practice ourselves. And so I think it's really important from our perspective as ECPAPAs that we are looking for those opportunities as well as to how we can change our practice to improve outcomes in this space, and using that data to inform that and have those conversations is really important. So,
have you put any change ideas in place around that attendance? I've had the same issue, and we actually now, if the child's absent 3 days, so a week, the kindergarten teacher phones the family. If the kindergarten teacher doesn't hear back in, say, another 2 or 3 days, she actually contacts our KPSA and myself to say, we haven't been able to get hold of this family. Is there any support that you can put in place, or if we know the family, anyone that can pop around and have a coffee. I know this isn't within our Best Start role, but the KPSAs or care zones might be able to pop around and do a home visit to see what's going on with that family. So we've been really targeted in no more than 3 absences before there's a phone call. So I'm wondering if you could put some change ideas and PDSAs in place with the services around limiting that time that the child's away a lot shorter, instead of it being months and months and months till you guys find out. Can you do a change idea around that?
Yep, and that's what we're, because it was just brought to our attention at the last meeting. What month are we in? February. Start of Feb, and so that's exactly what we've talked about.
Awesome.
So and a couple of change ideas really. So one about letting the services know. Like, you're not going to lose your funding. So, but we need to know when these children have withdrawn, so, we can try and link them in. Yes, let's look at even calling at the end, if they haven't shown up for a kinder day, without an explanation, even that day, just making a phone call and saying, oh, we missed you, at kinder today, didn't hear, just checking in, everything's okay. Now, whether they're able to do that, on that day, or like you said, after 2 or 3 days. What else were we looking at? There were a few different things. So we're definitely, because it was just brought to our attention at the start of Feb, but it has generated a lot of discussion about what we could do to ensure we don't get another 12 months down the track and find out another X amount have pulled out that we weren't aware of.
Was there a pattern to the timing of when these children, so was there a majority of children pulling out at a certain time?
No.
Okay,
but there was also, and there also were a number of actually, I suppose, legitimate reasons, some moved, family reasons, a whole, and, one moved to another service, but which I'm not even sure if we counted that, but I think it's the ones that the high number, and this is across the whole area, so we're not even just focusing on Shepparton, but the whole area, these children, withdrawn family reasons. So I think our concern is it doesn't even matter what the family reasons are, but who's supporting that family. When you think in this day and age, and particularly in Shepparton and probably Mitchellshire, there is a lot of targeted work going into these services, our ATSI services, but you actually wonder if everybody knows who's doing what. So those families they've just disappeared. So that's probably a little bit of what the work we want to try and do as well, because of the number of targeted support services here in Shepparton. But it's been great. It's actually a great learning.
It is really good
piece of work for us to focus on.
And sometimes it is good to get some negative data, because that's great. this is a perfect opportunity for improvement. I think that's like kind of the philosophy I bring into these kind of meetings as well. Like it's really good sometimes to know the things that other people are doing that you're not doing, and you kind of go, oh, well, maybe I could do that. Sometimes you can't, and sometimes it feels overwhelming when you hear this stuff. But it's the same. But it is sometimes really good to just pick one area that you can, like it is a problem, and you focus on it. And it's a great opportunity for improvement.
And it'll involve a lot of partners too. I think, you know, a lot of key stage. So that's good. Yeah.
I think that kind of data to inform really good conversation is really good because you get so much buy-in. It's just an opportunity to really see what, you know, people giving their theories on why and, you know, then what they could do in that space. It's a really, really important conversation to be having to get that buy-in, I think.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks.
Who do we go to next? Maybe Ballarat office. You go.
Oh, hi, can you hear us?
Yeah, we can.
Sorry, we've got to walk to the other end of the room to unmute, so you need to give us a second or two.
That's what I figured. I'm just going to kind of like, or maybe I should like say who's next. Maybe we can do, after this one, we might do Kiel, or just so that you know that you have to unmute when these guys wrap up.
Get ready. So it's Jane from Ballarat speaking first. And can I just start perhaps by backtracking briefly to, I think it's the lady from Casey in the pink top.
Yep, Leah. Yep.
I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name, but you were talking about your potential monthly surveys around relationship development between MCH and Kinder and so on. It'd be really good if we could have a look at that survey. Is that possible?
Yeah, I'll just email it to you. I mean, it's as I said, it's just 3 questions on a 1 to 10, but happy to share it. I don't know how it'll land, but it is something I'm hoping the partnership will buy into, because often you've got family services and other services around the table, and it's a way they can participate. So happy to share that.
Thank you very much, because we are just hearing in Moorabool time and time again about the need to continue that relationship development between services. And while we are doing what we can, and some of it through PDSA work and some not, I've never kind of thought to measure it. So that's really great, and one of the benefits of being here today. So thanks for that. So I think that for Moorabool, we're really quite a small site, and we're in, I don't know if you'd call it an enviable or an unenviable position of being quite successful in a lot of our work, regardless of what Best Start is doing. So what I mean by that is that my early years team are pretty switched on in terms of tracking early start enrolments, you know, late kinder enrolments, children in out-of-home care, all that sort of stuff's being done. And so sometimes as a facilitator, I'm left sitting scratching my head a little bit about where the need lies. So we've been exploring other avenues, if you like. We have started branching out to talk with some of our long day care services, our funded services, around their understanding of early start kinder, which is exposing some quite deep lack of understanding. So that's been a very interesting area for us, and quite a challenging one, because obviously we have no authority there, and it's all around, again, relationship building. So what started off as a very enthusiastic and keen cohort of long day care coordinators, it's kind of dropping off a bit. So that's an area that Best Start is picking up on and working in, and offering surveys and so on and so on. So we're starting to gather a little bit of data from them in their funded program. What else? Oh, and also because we have a very small partnership, and I'm talking, you know, 6 or 7 around the table for our partnership meetings, the buy-in has been very difficult, as I know it is for a lot of other services, but we've started to look at how Best Start can support their agencies more so around enrolments or referrals into parenting programs like Circle of Security, and that's starting to gain momentum. And that's been really interesting because I guess what I'm saying is that we're kind of broadening our horizons because a lot of the core work is being done effectively already. So it's an interesting space to be in for us. We have seen some great improvements in our small talk referrals. We've been working with a couple of our enhanced nurses around making those referrals through spreadsheets and so on, and I'm in the process of helping our small talk facilitator to write that up, so that's really encouraging to see good progress there. Someone else touched on I think it was Belinda in Shepparton, touched on the difficulty of scaling up. So while we see some progress and some great outcomes in our immediate environment, because I work in a hub, it's hard to expand that out to services that aren't in our immediate environment. So that's another challenge for us at Moorabool that we're working on.
I think some of, like, just listening to what you're saying, I think some of that one of the things I think is a really big challenge from a Best Start perspective using an improvement science approach is that often the work that you're doing feels like business as usual stuff. You know what I mean? Like you're saying that people aren't already doing those things. And so it's hard to get them to go that next step because they are getting some great outcomes. And so it's like, well, what can you do to improve it again? And sometimes that can feel unsatisfactory in some ways because it's kind of like, well, I'm just doing my job. Like this is what I do anyway. But I think obviously we're learning increasingly that those small changes are actually making a massive difference, you know, cumulatively. But it's kind of getting people to shift from that mindset that says, well, this is just business as usual. I'm just doing my job. To the fact that it is actually measurable, it's intentional. I am seeing an improvement. I can attribute that to me doing my job a little bit better. But again, that comes down to people, you know, thinking like the mentality that people have around that and whether or not, you know, because sometimes you're not prepared to say, well, that was the Best Start thing. You know what I mean? Because I'm just doing my job better. You know? And so I understand that can be a really big challenge as well. And because that is, given that we are looking at these very small changes in practice that can feel like business as usual almost, it can be a really big challenge from a Best Start facilitator's perspective to get people to engage in that. So. And also, you know, I'm very mindful of and this came out right back at the beginning when we were first being trained up in this sort of protectiveness that some people feel when you start talking about improvement, that, you know, you're telling someone that they're not doing their job properly, and that's a really tricky psychology, I guess. Absolutely, because not everybody is willing to improve because it does acknowledge that you've got a way to go. I think, you know, the people who seem to be most open to it are the ones that are probably most likely to be doing it anyway. Definitely. You know what I mean? So true.
It's also the way you sell it. So I've had the same issue, particularly with maternal child health, around them saying, well, I already do that, I already do that. So I end up going into them and saying, okay, what can I do to support you? What's something that you're really challenged with around families? So I was being sneaky. So I would get them to tell me what they've got a problem with, look at how that fits within our logic model, or maybe tweak it a little bit because it might not perfectly fit. But as soon as I can get them doing that one change idea in PDSA, then I'd go back and just congratulate them over the top. So really, really great work. It might have been a change for 1 or 2 children or families, but then go, oh, you know, what can we do to build on this? Because that was really, really good. I'm so proud, you know, that work's brilliant. And then they'll go, oh, well, I've had this issue as well.
That's fantastic, Michelle. But is Michelle? Yes. Are your nurses actually writing up the PDSAs?
No, majority of the time I have to do it. But they'll do the action part, and I go back and do the evaluation with them. Getting them to do the paperwork is in there impossible.
I agree.
Totally agree with that. So I've had to do it in the way to get buy-in.
And look, I don't know if there's time or space to talk through that today, but I'd be really keen to hear from others around who's doing most of the written work. You know,
and I can tell you, it varies completely across the state. Yeah, and it's completely what our advice on that is. What I mean, aspirationally, it's great to have everybody putting their own PDSAs in the system, and from a an improvement science approach, that's what you're aiming for. But we have to acknowledge that's not going to happen. I reckon probably in about 70% of cases, at least, we'd be talking where people are not going to do it themselves, and we have to acknowledge that. And I think you can make a decision on that whether or not you really want to push that, and you're not going to budge until they do it themselves, and that's completely fine if that's what you want to do. But you might decide that you will support, like Michelle does, in terms of the writing up or whatever, just to take that administrative burden off people, because when we're trying to get buy-in to the improvement approach, it can be really time consuming, or not time consuming necessarily. What you want to do is minimise the impact on them.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's where, as a strategy, you can determine that locally what you're going to do.
Right.
But you need to think, is it worth me making them do it themselves and not get any PDSA work on the system, as opposed to if I just spend the 10 or 15 minutes to fill out the template for them, even though it's not necessarily good for buy-in at the start, but it might be good for buy-in just to the improvement approach in general.
And that's I understand. That's what it's,
you know what I mean?
Getting the balance right.
And I've got to collaborate on a tablet. So if I take the tablet out to the service, we can write the PDSA up while I'm there. They do the action, I go back and we evaluate together. Because I found also that the change idea and PDSA template is a fear of educators. So if you write it with them, and they can put their wording in there and you make it all nice, it's not as overwhelming for them.
I understand. Yeah, that's great. That's great. We just jumping a little bit now, and thanks for that, but we tend to do most of our surveying on the iPad, so physically in the rooms with the parents or the staff or whoever, and it's reasonably effective, but again, we're very small numbers, and so as you were saying earlier, Rachel, that it's really hard to start analysing and making effective decisions when you've only had 10 responses to a survey. Really, what's that telling us? So that's why we're starting to think a bit more laterally about how we can engage, for example, long day care services and so on. So that's kind of where we're at in Wirrabul. And we're really excited about some of the cultural safety work that we're doing too, and that's just growing from strength to strength. But that's a whole other story. So that's great. Thanks.
In Ballarat, yes, we've got lots of things going also. One thing, yes, what James was just saying, just the PDSAs and the portal and the coaching is sometimes a bit of a challenge. I found with one of those, I guess, trying to make whoever the partner is feel really comfortable that they can just type whatever they like. So I will start them off, but literally just type whatever you like. It really doesn't matter. Because I think, again, the fear, because there's a lot of, jargon with
exactly.
Especially in long day cares, they're just like, oh, no, that's not my thing. But once I've said to them, just put dot points down, you know your program, you know what you're doing. I really need you to explain it to me however you want to. Sitting there with them, but getting them to do the typing has had a bit more of the buy-in. And then, like you were saying, Michelle, jazz it up a bit and help with the study aspect. Then when they look at it, they're like, oh, wow, you did this.
Actually, yeah.
Reflecting from last year, lots of our PDSAs, and we were a bit stop-start last year in relation to staffing numbers and things, but definitely towards the second part of the year, we were getting a bit more traction. We had lots of adaptations last year. We probably didn't adopt a lot. So we are going to be looking more at current practices and currently doing a little bit of a stock take of the families that we've got. Because we do have a lot of families, we run a lot of things internal. We've got access to central kinder enrolment as well. Supported play groups, quite a large program. So we do have a lot of enrolled and engaged families that we could be making sure, and some are going to be eligible that we've missed for things like ESK. So we're going to be just going through, like I said, stock taking what we've got.
Can I just go into what you said about the adaptation?
Yes.
And that's really good to hear, because we don't want, like, in a you know, a true improvement science model, you want to be adapting constantly, really, before you start. Like, you know, it should take quite some time before you're adopting. So there is still an inclination to test something once and then adopt it into practice.
Yeah, that's so true.
Best practice is to continue to run that through a couple of different adaptations to see if you are getting the maximum benefit or the maximum impact that you can get. So it is good to hear that you didn't have as many, you know, sort of PDSA cycles that you were adopting, because we do want to see them running through a number of tests, you know, like to see if you are having the same impact, or whether, you know, tweaking slightly can have a positive impact on what you're achieving. So that's good to hear.
One of the limitations, I guess, with the portal is that you can't be grabbing any of the change orders from last year. So if you have kids adapting, we've got to type them all.
Yes,
so that's a bit frustrating.
Yeah, it is.
And yet I've found especially I've only been in the role for about 6 months, so I love the gallery that's on there. I've pinched lots of people's ideas, so thanks everyone.
And that, like, again, if everyone can just keep remembering to be, you know, selecting some PDSAs that you think have some merit and some kind of important learning, and making sure that they're shared on the gallery.
And some are so simple, which is
exactly,
and that's why, like, I'm using the expression a stock take, but lots of people have done that, looking at what we've got rather than having to be new all the time. Just going through a number of PDSAs have come from that, and we'll definitely be able to have learnings, and some might be able to adopt it because they are quite simple things that we can do. And we're also focusing on staff training and education, similar to what a couple of other people have been saying. So with our surveying, we're going to look at surveying staff in the first and third quarter, and then families in the second and fourth also, but around that education, see if that's translating into enrolments or attendance.
Yeah, fantastic.
So they're probably the main things for us.
Excellent, good to hear. We'll go to Keilor, and after that we might go to the Moe office, just to give you guys a heads up. So Keilor, I am conscious that there's probably not a lot to report from the Keilor office, but give it a crack anyway.
Yeah, so hi everyone. I've been here now, I think, for about 2 weeks officially. So I've got a few things. So, okay, we're talking about measures. So we've basically got 4 measures that we're working with, one for each type of service. So with maternal and child health, we are looking at the rates of eligible 3.5-year-old checks happening in our kindergarten, in our BPA kindergartens. So I think I really wanted to have something that we were focusing on, that integration between MCH and other services, because I think that's one of the, what I see as one of the biggest touch points for us at Brimbank is how we can make MCH integrate more with some of the other services. So that was something that I think we'll be able to measure. It seems like it'll be a lot of work to measure, but I think that would be an effective one for conversations.
So what are you actually measuring there? Sorry, you're measuring the number of kids that in the BPA services that haven't had their 3.5-year check, or have, or like, okay, yep. So that'll be your data starting point, sort of thing. Yeah, cool.
We're also looking at playgroups. We've got the number of referrals into kindergarten from our playgroups. So a number of ESK referrals, and tracking where the referrals are coming from. So I'm interested to see where how many referrals we're getting from each of the different services into our ESK system. So I think that will again be a point of conversation, because I get different stories from different parts of the system. So I'll be interested to see where they actually line up. We are also running quite a big attendance project at Brimbank. We're doing a iPad-based attendance program for parents at 16 kindergartens. So that's bringing in quite a lot of data, and at the moment it's just an overwhelming amount of data. So trying to work out what we're going to do with that. Getting back to the point, one thing we did notice was, we did a bit of this last year, was we are tracking the reasons for non-attendance as well. And the interesting one, I think, is the number of unexplained attendances in a row. So rather than 3 non-attendances being the touch point, I think it's 3 unexplained attendances. Because we know that people are on holidays or on family reasons or whatever it is, but it's that I think has become the data that's become the most interesting out of everything that we're collecting.
Yeah.
So we'll be running that with our other kindergarten management service as well to collect against that, only for ESK kids. So they're sort of 4 metrics. They don't sort of cover everything that we want, but they sort of give a spectrum, and I think they're useful for us for discussion points.
How good. That's excellent. Okay, and we'll be interested to see what you ultimately land on in your attendance project. You know, because you're part of a pilot project that's department funded, isn't it? And I think Mildura might be as well. So it'll be really interesting to see, once you are doing that, what kind of data is actually interesting from a Best Start partnership perspective. It'd be really good to hear what you guys learn from that.
One thing already I can see is there's 3 streams of kids. There's one group of kids who turn up on time every day. There's one group of kids who turn up late every day. And there's one group of kids who are intermittent attenders.
Yeah.
And that each kindergarten has a different mix of which of those are in each group, but they all have the mix.
Yeah.
So I was amazed by the number of kids that turn up late every day to every session. So
yeah, that's an interesting one.
But that's one of the takeaways.
Yeah, great. Thank
So,
you.
yeah, that's us. Thank you.
So go to Moe now.
So I'm at South Coast, and I've got a few complications. Probably the biggest one for me is that I cover 2 local government areas.
Just interrupt. Sorry, it's Carmel Sale. Raquel and I have to go now, so apologies. We've got to go to a Best Start meeting. So
Yeah, no worries. I won't call on you then to present.
all
Sarah,
right.
I've done it earlier.
No,
Hey?
we found it really useful listening to everybody. So
Yeah, great.
It's
Awesome.
been good.
All right, and hopefully, the technology will work and will be uploaded the meeting link if you want to see the rest of it. Get ready.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sorry, Kylie.
So that's all right. One of my big underpinning challenges is I cover 2 local government areas, and one has a local government that's pretty hands-on in the early years space, central enrolment, maternal and child health, preschool field officer, blah-de-blah-de-blah. The other one is the other extreme, has a really hands-off council, no centralised enrolment, low engagement across the early years system. So that's a bit of a challenge with planning. Last year, we really focused on very simple data. We looked at ESK participation, and we looked at 2-year-old maternal and child health. And it's been really interesting because just having those very simple measures across the 12 months while we built the partnership, we were also able to track progress very simplistically. And when we came to the end of the year to review, we had some great baseline data.
Can I just go back a step and just provide context to your site for people who may not be aware? So when Kylie took over at South Coast, there wasn't even a partnership to speak of, really. So this is a site that has had to build from scratch effectively, and even the partners that were there previously they weren't really working in an improvement, although I think it's fair to say they weren't at all, were they using improvement methodology. So Kylie's really had to, for those people who might be listening who have had that real start from scratch perspective, you're a great testament to what can be done, like using these particular measures, etc. So yeah, I just wanted to give that context. I think it's really important to understand where you've come from to where you're at now. So.
And that might be a theme for another meeting, is starting from scratch.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's not a bad idea.
Complex.
Absolutely.
But just some key things that I've been able to achieve. Last year, working with the 2 maternal and child health teams, we've been able to establish maternal and child health data going back to 2012. So we've been able to track trends in participation rates. And I've also been able to break out gaps in participation for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and families, and build a bit of evidence over years to show that. And one of the real benefits of my area is we have low numbers of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families. We have about 40 children aged 0 to 5 in each of the local government areas, which makes it a fantastic target group.
Absolutely.
So because of that data in maternal and child health and in ESK, what we were able to show at the end of last year was in one of my shires, only one child was enrolled for ESK last year who was Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. But the maternal and child health data showed us we should have had about 5 or 6. So that's given us now the springboard of, okay, we're focusing on this year. We're going to really focus on ESK for the Koori kids. We got some really good achievements last year for children known to child protection, but this area needs some more focus. And so, like some other sites, we're working closely with the APSA and the KESO. And I'm actually excited, next week we're establishing our first Aboriginal working group for early years for South Coast, and we'll really focus on ESK and also the participation gaps in maternal and child health. So we're targeting just to get the maternal and child health participation up to the benchmark standards for all children, and particularly Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. So that's a huge achievement down here. But it just shows when you start collecting really simple data, you then can step up to the next level the next year and build on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the maternal and child health data, what I've found is it takes a lot of relationship building with your maternal and child health teams and establishing some processes. And it's taken me 2 years, and I got CEDAS. I've been put onto CEDAS last week, so I can start generating my own reports. But I also have the council I work with, I have to get reports from them. But then working together to pull together the data, the maternal and child health teams find that very helpful. So it's sort of this scratching each other's backs and working together. And I've established a tool for this year where we're going to track participation rate by month at each site.
She made a great tool.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. So,
and you're getting that from CEDAS?
Yeah, we're using annual report data to look at key age and stage visits versus population data. It's a pretty complicated formula, but it seems to be working pretty well.
Because we were doing it for individual maternal and child health visits, and this one covers from home visit to 3.5-year-old participation. So I'm very grateful to Kylie.
Yeah. And I've just done a table that colour codes it. So if you're within 5% of the benchmark, you're green, and that's all we're targeting is to be in the green. And so you can look at it straight away and go, okay, we need to look at 8 months. We need to look at this.
Is that something you'd be happy to share across the board?
It would be, but it would need a bit of explanation.
Yeah, okay.
So it's a bit complicated.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yes, definitely, and happy for people to give a call if you want.
Great.
The other thing I just wanted to suggest too is because I've got one part of my site that's really behind the 8 ball, some of our logic model planning has been dependent on what data is available. And so this year we're going to be focusing on out-of-home care children, because for the first time ever we've actually got an established process with Lookout of sharing data monthly. And so we're actually going to track children individually to ensure that they're engaged with ESK or Kinder if they're eligible, and to ensure they're engaged with maternal and child health. But because our numbers are small, we're a bit different to some of the other sites, because really it's only, I'll give you an example, our list for November, there were only 10 children on the list. So it's very easy for us to track that.
Yeah. But it's really good because I think what's really important, and I think this is relevant to sort of everyone in different contexts, is that the learning that you can get from those 10 kids and what you like, it is a smaller number, and so therefore you can really focus on it, but that learning can then be applied where you have 50, 100 kids. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that and know that that learning can then be tested by others. So I really love the fact that even though you might be dealing with small numbers, the impact can ultimately have massive consequences. So it's good.
It actually is really fortunate for us that it is such a small cohort, because I'm hopeful that we'll be able to show some really significant change in the year.
Exactly.
And I guess that just brings me to, because I've found over the last year, it's the spreadsheets that I developed that talk to the partners more than the portal. So I've had low engagement. I can't get partners to look at the portal unless I show them at a meeting. And I still haven't set up my schema yet. But I find that I can't do as much as I can on an Excel spreadsheet.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's
100% a limitation of the system. So yeah, and that's what I know. Like when we were looking at, who sort of engaged with the portal last year, I know that for some people who didn't engage, it wasn't that they weren't engaged with data, because they weren't engaged with the portal, because there are those limitations, and sometimes you want to engage much more with the data, and so therefore you can't do that given the limitations. So yeah.
Just a few things. Just with ESK data collection, I've found I've had to put in processes for January to March, because of course we can't get data from the department in this period.
Yeah, exactly.
At one side I can go to central enrolment, easy peasy. The other side I have to approach every kindergarten separately.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a challenge there. But it was very helpful for us to have to disaggregate the data, so we had separate reporting for children known to child protection and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, because we found vast differences in our performance. So that was just to help other people if you're setting up data collection. With surveys, I've had really good participation on both staff and family surveys, and I just wanted to fly the old school flag. We do paper-based.
Yeah.
And it's been, so we've got a small population, remember, I get 40 families each quarter from each site, so I'm getting 80 altogether, and I get 20 to 30 service providers from each site. So I think they're pretty good numbers. Yeah, and I really simplified the family ones to they're 4 questions, that's it, keep it really simple. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And just my last little thing that's been helpful this year, we had a cyber attack last year that affected my access to emails, internet, portal, everything, contacts, for a couple of months. I only got back on January the 6th. So I had to approach logic model planning really differently this year. And just something that's worked a treat, I actually did the maternal and child health planning with my 2 sites separately with each maternal and child health team. And we did 2 hours going through the data together, and they wrote the stretch goals. And we this year are going to do all our improvement work at their team meetings. So we'll do, that's how the working group will go there. But already I've found the buy-in is significantly increased, and I just wanted to share that as an effective method, because it's a bit of a tricky place to engage, busy people. And
absolutely.
But it was really exciting because those teams themselves identified the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander gaps, and we need to do something about this. So that gives us a momentum to get it going, rather than me coming in and saying there's a gap, you've got to do something about it. So yeah.
Also, just before we go on, Kylie, just want to touch on some of the things that you guys have implemented in your local area around supporting each other in the work that you're doing.
Oh, sure, in Gippsland. So in Gippsland, we've established a Best Start facilitators network, and across, I think we've got 6 sites that get together, and we meet every 2nd month, and we take it in turns to prepare the agenda and chair the meeting. And we started that last year, I think. And then what we realised during the year is we needed to expand somewhat. So we've also included Lookout. So they come along to our meeting now, and also the early childhood development workers down in Gippsland. And we get together, and we're doing a bit of cross-boundary work. So we might work on some improvement work together. A good example at the moment is we've got an early start kinder flyer that 3 of our local councils have developed, and we're currently working to get the other 3 councils onto that, so that when that flyer goes out to carers at Berry Street or whatever, doesn't matter where you live, you've got the contact details of who to go to. We're doing sort of cross-boundary work together, and it's helpful, I think, on a number of levels. It's just great to put your heads together and problem solve. We share our challenges and achievements. We get guest speakers, we do various things, but it's also really helpful for new people into the role, because we can put supports in around that person, because I think most of us, certainly at my organisation, no one understands Best Start.
And actually,
organisation,
that's a really interesting point around organisational understanding, because I know that some of the most challenging I get some of the biggest challenges for facilitators has been where their organisation doesn't fully understand the way the Best Start now works, and it is really complex, and it's very challenging if you come into the facilitator role and you don't fully understand it, and your fund holder has very different expectations of it as well. It is particularly challenging because how do you then get on track when there's so much complexity in the work? It is a very like the position itself requires a huge, like everybody in the room would know the skill set that you require to be able to be a Best Start facilitator. It is huge. It is such a complex role. You have to be able to influence. And if you don't have that understanding from the fund holder perspective as well, it can be a really, really big challenge. And so I think that is really important to really highlight that you sort of have to work as a facilitator. You have to understand the role first to be able to then know that you're doing the right thing from and push back sometimes against your organisation, which isn't always appropriate or easy. And so it is a really, really big challenge. So I think yeah, that's a really, really important point to make.
I actually did a cheat sheet. So I was going out and talking to other community orgs about what Best Start is. And if I gave them the handbook, they're going to look at it and go, oh my God.
Yeah.
So I actually just did like a one-pager, and I've presented that to other organisations in really basic language. Because although my organisation understands Best Start really well, I was finding other community orgs were, or they had the old model in their mind. So
yeah, and that's it. A lot of attachment in some partnerships, I think to this day, even with the old model, and this mentality that it's very events based. It's very much partnership, consensus, that kind of idea. And we know that that's just not how it is anymore. And acknowledging that is really important in order to actually allow our facilitators to get the job done. So yeah, it's a really big challenge. So cheat sheets might be helpful as well.
Cheat sheets are great.
Just even within your own organisation, sometimes as a facilitator.
I've had good success with that too, and I also have had good success with simplifying language across the board. So as soon as you say PDSA, people go like, yeah. And so I talk improvement, and I try to limit how much I say PDSA because it freaks people out.
Absolutely. So that's what I think. I think, same with new facilitators. I think when new facilitators try to come on board and get across the science of it, it's really overwhelming. If you're just thinking really simple terms, it can often be something that you can actually start to, hit the ground running a little bit better and not have to be so overwhelmed by those kinds of things. But you have to understand it first in order to be able to simplify it.
Yeah.
That's a challenge. So.
But back to our network down here, I mean, it can be a pretty isolating role, and possibly even more so when you're rural, because we're a few hours from each other. So if anyone out there is interested and wanted to attend one of our meetings, you're more than welcome to come and have a look at what we do and take that idea back to your area too, because I think it's been really helpful.
May 5th, I think, is the next one.
Yeah, I think, and me coming in as a new facilitator, it was really good too. Yeah. Like I had Sarah, of course, which was awesome, but meeting everyone and knowing their challenges, starting the roles and stuff, I think it's been really good.
Yeah. Do you want to go?
Oh, it feels so quiet, like they can't hear what you're saying. What I have to share, I think, is quite similar to Kylie. We had some fairly basic measures last year, measuring early start kinder and some maternal and child health, key age and stage visits. And what we did different this year was we did a logic model review and had partners come and a few practitioners as well come to look over the data and come up with what our short-term outcomes should be based on. But when it came to creating the stretch goals, we actually worked directly with team leaders to get a stretch goal. So hopefully if those team leaders and were on board with what our stretch goals or what we were going to measure, our prediction is then that will lead to more involvement with improvement work down for the year. So, and when Kylie talks about, I wish we had, looking back, and this, I feel like these meetings, this is what happens. It's like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Wish I could do that and that, but it's for next year perhaps to look at is consulting more in depth with the actual nurses. We do have a focus on service collaboration, so I think that's where some of those actually talking with the team leaders who are interacting with other organizations comes into place. But now we have 4 measures this year rather than the 2, I think it was. And I'm just trying to think of what to share to, we're looking at the partnership shows to look at referrals that come into maternal and child health and kinder. Latrobe City covers most of that, certainly maternal and child health and most of early start kinder, but not all. There are some private. And also the same as Kylie, I got on board with, we were going to look at children who had re-engaged after do not attend. And that got very complicated and was going to be really time consuming to measure, but so interesting. But when I was looking at it, I thought, then I found out Kylie was looking at the benchmarks and that was embraced by the maternal and child health coordinating staff. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Probably just what we did at the last partnership meeting, I'd say.
Oh yeah, that's
we wanted to re-engage the partners a little bit more because obviously they're not using the portal as much as we would like, as probably everyone has that. So we tried to make the partnership meeting a bit more interactive, and we found a PDSA little worksheet, and we got them to partner up with each other so they could bounce off each other and come up with PDSAs, and they all actually did come up with something, and one even went on the portal and put it into the portal. So,
yeah, right, nice.
Yeah, so instead of just showing them data on the screens, we're getting them to talk more amongst themselves, and if it's on paper, that's fine, we can put it in.
Exactly.
It was a nice surprise that one of the partners went and
exactly,
which was fantastic. And she's got access to so many families in Gippsland, because what's her title again? The community.
Oh, you're talking about Our Place.
Yeah, Our Place facilitator. So she's got access to a lot of families. So I've just found that they're getting a bit more excited about making changes and doing PDSAs because we're involving them a lot more and just making every meeting a lot more interactive.
Rather than just a data.
Yeah. You can see
review.
sort of they glaze over a little bit and go, oh, what are we here for? And the last one, there was like chocolates involved and little games and things. So awesome. just trying to get them excited, and it actually has stemmed a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
Partnership.
We're also using a visual, like a one-pager to show that shows what the measure is, some of the change ideas that have been done and adopted, who's been involved. And we've decided that will take the place of, I used to do a facilitator's report that was just really long and, said who I met with and blah, blah, blah. But instead we're just capturing it as a visual, and that we've gotten a really good response from partners that they like that. And it gives, I don't know how it's going to work this year because now that we have 4 measures, but I'll work on that as it goes. We still want to keep it simple. But they like that, and they can take it to their organizations and say, this is what Best Start's doing. And it's a PDSA in itself to see if that generates more ideas from outside organizations.
Yeah, exactly.
I just found that the more we've simplified things, the more people have become involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then they introduce us to somebody else, and then
get
another partner.
Exactly. And that's the thing, like, I think is really interesting. So look at what these guys have been doing, and like one of the more successful things that they've done is offer cultural safety, we call it cultural safety training to early childhood services, but requiring them before they leave to actually have developed a PDSA, then Michelle can follow up with them. And so that's completely, so they're actually getting into that mindset. It's not just about you're not just getting the training, it's about what are you going to now implement in your service. And Michelle's going to hassle you until you do. Now that's a really good strategy, because the PD in itself is not actually a change in practice from a bit, like when they asked us initially around it, of course I put that whole central hat was, well, no, because that's not a change in practice. But if you do PDSAs as a result of that, then that actually, that can generate the change ideas. So it's around, it wasn't actually the PDSA itself what wasn't around delivering the cultural safety training. It was around what happens next. And so I think where you have people and you get them to actually workshop these ideas on the spot, that's where you actually have the opportunity to generate plenty of change ideas, like you guys obviously did in your partnership meeting as well. And that's where you can follow up those PDSAs. And I think that really, that helps enormously. But what I was also going to say is, when I see what has happened here, and this is really small numbers that we're talking about in terms of their area of focus, but the change in the service system as a whole is unbelievable. But what we are now starting to see is that our schools are because obviously from my perspective, I might be selling the Best Start approach occasionally in meetings with schools as well, when we're talking about, career engagement, for instance. And what's actually now starting to happen is that the schools are really interested in starting to embed this improvement idea as well, because they understand it's really simple. And I think that is the key to the success of Best Start, is if you can make it as simple as humanly possible, that people understand that this is just doing what they normally do better and more intentionally, to see that they're having an impact, then suddenly people are more willing to try something. And I think the more simple it is, the more success people seem to be having. And when I think about the fact that even though we've got really small numbers here, yet the schools are now starting to look at this as a way to, and it's very early days in that space, but they are starting to look at how they can change their practice. I use it in our own office meetings about saying, reinforcing that notion that what can we do in terms of just making a small change in our practice that's going to improve outcomes for Aboriginal kids. It's those constant, very small provocations, but we're actually seeing it happening now across a much bigger space because of the simplicity of it. And I think we can't, they're moving from the old approach to Best Start to the new approach. There was a value issue that people seem to have, that people weren't valuing these small changes because it's kind of business as usual. And I think where it ultimately, once it starts to snowball and you do start to see the impact that's made, and obviously when you're collecting data, etc., it is genuinely informing the picture and you know exactly what's happening as a result of the work that you're doing. I think it then speaks to other people, and then they start, you apply it across a heap more context. So I think it's really exciting to see that even the very, very small things can ultimately have a massive impact on, the service system as a whole, moving into schools even. So, we know schools, it's A, traditionally very hard to engage, but B, very big power imbalance for families moving into schools. And, schools' idea of partnering with families tends to be, I want the families to come to the school so I can tell them what to do. And that's very different to an early childhood setting. And so to start even just getting them thinking in that context is really helpful. So, I just think in terms of that value side, we can't underestimate the impact of very small changes. So it's good.
It's interesting that you said that, because we're at DET right now, and as I was walking back to come back from the bathroom, I overheard they're having some big meeting, and I don't know who was there, but I heard them say they were actually talking about what small change they could make with speaking with a student, and I was like, ooh. I don't know what the meeting's about, but I just thought it was like, exactly, they're talking improvements.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We this year, to do our logic model, we surveyed Aboriginal community families to see what was going to be contained in our logic model, and I was really excited that this is the first time in 3 years that cultural safety is not the priority for early childhood. What has come up is Aboriginal education and experiences in kinder. So our community's actually moved away from giving us feedback that the service needs to be more culturally safe. They want more cultural education.
And you can't get there without cultural safety.
And you can't get get there without cultural safety. So that was really exciting for us, that was actually the feedback from families.
But also you need to tell the story of Gabby and not having any kids.
Oh yes. Yeah, this is going to sound really weird, but we have a kindergarten teacher where majority of our families used to enrol to participate in kinder, our Aboriginal community, because they felt culturally safe with that kindergarten teacher. That was 3 years ago. Majority of our enrolments were with that kindergarten teacher. This year, she has no Aboriginal children enrolled in her kinder because they're actually attending every kinder in our community, which is bloody magnificent. So bad for Gabby because she misses all the families, but fantastic for our families that now feel safe enough to enrol across multiple kindergartens.
It's interesting to talk to you, Michelle, if you wanted to one day with us.
because we would like that in our region as well. So yeah, it'd be good to touch base with you.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah, no, huge.
It's really
similar impact in MCH where you had really terrible Aboriginal participation rates. It's sitting at 95% across all key ages and stages now for Aboriginal kids. So that's
so we've gone from, I think it was like 83 to 96.
Well, we definitely want to chat.
So we're sitting higher than mainstream. I shouldn't say that, but I bragged.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you know, you guys will all know these are huge wins, and we are talking about small numbers, but it's the learning that you can get then gets applied. And as I said, it's now expanding into the school space. It's expanding beyond just this particular area. So it's amazing. So.
Or a trip to Horsham.
There's been a few of them.
Yeah.
It's one of the great challenges in the Koori space, though, of what comes first, because we've worked on, we're doing active outreach and engagement this year and really bounced it around, because what's the point if it's not culturally safe when you get there?
Exactly.
But what we've done is built that into our strategies. Is cultural safety is one of our strategies in the active outreach and engagement area. So I really utilised those outcome statements, the 6 outcome statement areas. Went through the key things in there to help generate our strategies this year. And so that'll be interesting to see how that goes as well. So although in Bass Coast we don't actually have a specific Koori target, our strategies are all in the Koori space and we'll be measuring in the Koori space. So, but they come in under the mainstream targets.
Awesome.
So, Bob Latrobe, did you want to have any input at this point in time? I figured because you guys are definitely in that stage of rebuilding at this point in time, and so
absolutely, and very new in doing so. So we're probably rebuilding not only the partnership, but obviously reconnecting to the partners and as well. So we're doing that both in South or in Droon and in the Valley.
Yeah, heaps of work ahead, and that's why I guess that notion of that's keeping everything really simple is so important. I think particularly for a site like yours where you are starting from scratch effectively, it's a massive challenge, and the more simple it is, the better it will be.
And at the moment our challenge is staffing, so recruitment with the Valley particularly. I think we're at to 5 times to market at the moment. So
exactly. It's a fair challenge.
Yes.
Okay, so I know I'm really conscious that we are going well over time, but I suspected that would be the case. I'm still going to go around to each of the sites because I think it's important that we hear from everybody. And once we go through this particular part of the conversation, I'll just throw in a couple of the updates I want to make sure that I get through. And then if we have some time at the end of that, then we'll start looking at partnership re-engagement. We've kind of touched on that a little bit anyway as part of the measurement conversation, but that's sort of the plan for the rest of the session. So maybe we'll go to Robinvale now. Sorry, I know you've got a really long way to go before you get to the screen in Robinvale. So. But I also noticed that it looked like the Mildura facilitator might have arrived now as well. So,
hear us?
Yeah, we can.
Excellent. We actually had a button close to us, so we didn't.
Oh, lovely. Even better.
Well, I will start, and I do apologise if I've missed anything because I did miss the first half an hour. But my general opinion is that we have exactly the same issues as everyone else who has spoken this morning, and I have really enjoyed this session. I was feeling quite stressed and overwhelmed, and it's just really helped clarify a lot of things for me. So thank you for organising this. So I went into this year thinking, I learned so much from 2019 that I won't make those same mistakes again. Realise I'm doing the same thing again. And it is just, things snowball. You think you're really focusing and targeting down on one area, and you realise that area is bigger than you imagined. Every time you try and do something, you realise there's more issues, there's more complexity, that sort of thing. So just in the discussions today, I've really learned a lot from other people's ideas, and I'm going to target my ideas even smaller. And I think that's the biggest thing for me is making sure I keep going back to our focus group and keep going back to those two basic key outcomes. Because I want to solve the problems of the world.
Exactly, it's a really easy trap to fall into. And from the partnership perspective, absolutely, because everyone's in a position that they can potentially solve the problems of the world. But as soon as it starts kind of branching out, before you know it, it's overwhelming and you get nothing done effectively.
That's right. And I've spent the whole last year trying to focus on collaboration and building up the partnership and building up the working groups. And I feel like I've done that somewhat successfully, but now I'm trying to take on everything everyone's saying, and they're all coming at it from very different points of views with very different ideas about what a priority is. And some of them do sit outside the Best Start, role. So I need to really just go back and look at the priorities and just let people know that I still value their inputs, but that we do need to scale things right back and just try and make sure everyone feels heard and involved while still keeping things
Which again is that notion of the complexity of the role. You know what I mean? Like, because your traditional Best Start facilitator role could have sometimes, like in some sites, that role could be quite a junior role, for instance, because it was a lot of coordinating of events and stuff. That's a completely different complexity to what it is that you guys are doing now. And it's that kind of influence that you have to be able to exert that is really challenging. It's definitely not an easy thing in any way to be able to try and balance that. So it is a challenge.
Yeah, and I think I just was so busy building relationships last year that I've realised now that this year's focus actually does need to be quite different. Like, obviously not alienate people, but just really bring it back to what Best Start is. It's trialling those small ideas and using data to guide those ideas. So yeah, that's been a good learning from last year and now today.
Yeah, that's good.
So just one thing I wanted to talk about is I heard someone talking about an ESK flyer that they were putting out, and it just made me think about some of the things that I've developed or am looking to develop. And I was wondering, is there a place where we could share resources? I know we've got the gallery that our PDSA ideas. Is the collaboration site a place where we could share resources?
It is, but not if you want people to see them. You probably want to.
But if people maybe people would visit the site.
I know. I'd like to think that's true. History would suggest that's not actually going to be the case. And I did many a PDSA around trying to get people to engage with the collaboration site that were unsuccessful, including. I can reveal this now. I did used to put up bits of policy change on the collaboration site as a means of consultation because everybody had access to it, and I never once had a bit of feedback around those policy changes because I don't think anyone saw it. And so I think it's probably better to email that out. And I think one of the things that would be really good to do there's no easy way around it at the moment. We were looking originally at putting a facility in the portal that was going to be like a chat area where you could potentially do something like that. That may still happen. If there's a demand for it, we could potentially do that. In the interim, I think it's really just email, unfortunately, to kind of share those resources, which can be a bit annoying because you're going to have really massive email chains potentially. But I think it is really helpful to be able to share those kinds of things. And just going back to that as a notion, I see it kind of like the, just putting that whole central annoying hat on again, as I will, the PDSA around like a development of a flyer isn't around the development of the flyer as such. It's around what you do with the flyer and what impact that flyer can then have. So it's not around, like it might be around the relationships that you build in developing that flyer, or it might be, which I know you guys did around breastfeeding to engage the MCH nurses. And so they produced a poster around breastfeeding that was really localised to this context, and they worked because they couldn't engage with the MCH. Yeah, and so they knew they were passionate. So Michelle used that as an engagement tool, and so the PDSA, while it produced a poster from the MCH and the community perspective, from Michelle's perspective, that's not the intent of the PDSA. The PDSA was around building relationships. So similarly, when we have resources that we're talking about around ESK and that kind of thing, it's really important, but it's around like how do you measure the impact, and what are you going to do with that flyer once you've got it that actually tells you whether that flyer has had an impact. So is it just going to be that you're producing a poster and sticking it on the wall? How will you know then that you've actually made a difference? That's really challenging to be able to measure. Similarly, like I know people like to have Facebook posts, for instance, and interaction with Facebook posts, and because you can get some data around that, but that's really challenging because you don't know who you're actually seeing. I could be seeing Mildura stuff. I do see Mildura stuff actually in Horsham, and that's not going to be helpful. You know what I mean? Because you don't know the impact just from that. So I guess it's just thinking in terms of, from the Best Start perspective, those resources are really, really important. But it's how they're used and how you can measure the impact. So I just wanted to touch on that, because I think it's something that we all kind of, like, I think a lot of Best Start sites are developing resources, so it's just good to be mindful of how they can be used effectively in the Best Start context. So.
Yeah, and I think the resources take so long to develop for a PDSA that could be done very quickly once you had the resources.
That's
and
right.
I feel like we could just increase the sharing of those resources.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That is going to make the efficiency of what we're doing a lot better.
Yep. Yep, that's noted. If we do have the budget, we can potentially add that to the portal as a space for doing that.
Yeah. And in the meantime, I'm happy for anyone to email me.
Yeah. I was just going to add that the challenge around that, it would be good if you could look further into it, Rachel, because you don't know what you don't know. So
exactly.
Making that statement, if anyone could just email me, anything, it's too broad. So having a one place to go to would be helpful, I think.
Yeah, we definitely, as I said, we did that. It was just that we changed the priorities to a couple of other areas to focus on for the portal upgrade, but we do have it on the agenda, so it's certainly just something we need to pull the trigger on. So it's already been planned for, so it's just whether we have the budget or not, so I'll look into that.
If you had a document section, could you actually, where that document is loaded, say we did load something into that section on the portal, how it could link it to, in that shareability, we've got the share space of the PDSAs, it'd be great if it could actually link to the PDSA it relates to.
Yes.
Change.org, or somewhere where you can say, so you're not just getting the document, you're actually getting the purpose of the document.
Yeah, it would be, but you might have to do that when you upload it.
Yeah.
You might have to, because it'll be like a message board, kind of a chat.
Oh, you'd have to manually type in.
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't think we can get around it otherwise. I just think the cost to do that might be bigger than benefit, you know what I mean? So we might, and that's been a lot of the case with the portal, like there are limitations in the portal because of the cost of, certain aspects, being able to add, additional functionality, that kind of stuff. It does.
You could just put if you loaded up a document, you could just say CPDSA in share.
That's exactly right. Yep, that's what
Sorry, Rachel, I was just thinking with those resources, if as part of the like when you do your PDSA write-up, can there be an option to attach a document, like attach the resource? Yeah, is that what we were just saying?
That's
so
when
you're talking about, well, the PDSA was actually around the effectiveness of this, but here's the attachment, here's the resource that was actually developed, so then that might be cheaper or easier than trying to create a whole new tab of sharing resources.
I'll see how we go. If that can be done, then happy to do that. But it might be a challenge. So, but I'll investigate. That's completely fine. I've noted that down. So we'll definitely follow up with the developer around that and work out where, how easy or difficult it is. So.
Yeah.
Good idea.
And just one more thing from me, in terms of the partnership meetings, I was struggling to get buy-in at the right level. and I have sown the seeds in my community, and it looks like it's about to take off, that there may be an early years strategic alignment network meeting, which will have a whole lot of different partnerships or whatever as agenda items, and which Best Start could be one agenda item, and that way we'd get buy-in from the community and actually hear a lot more about what else is going on. So fingers crossed that comes to fruition, and those drawing up terms of reference at the moment, so exciting.
And so would the Best Start work occur, like driven by the partnership, like that side of the work, would that occur there, or would it be like almost a subset of that partnership you're talking about?
So the way we've got it working at the moment is we have the partnership that does the logic model, and then we have working groups around each of the outcomes, and then we have improvement teams focusing on PDSAs as well. So there's a bit of a hierarchy going on there.
Okay, cool.
Oh, well, I'm aware of the time, so I won't say too much. That's what it is. No, I just wanted to say that I still feel as if I'm finding my feet a little bit with Best Start, and it's great to hear others talk about the, you know, it is very complex and these things take a while. But my main focus has been doing the PDSAs since I've sort of been on board. But and it's just great in a way to hear that we have the same challenges and things, and how others are dealing with that. And I've just, I just find that these meetings are very, very valuable for me in particular. Well, probably for everybody, but I'm finding it personally very valuable. And the other thing I wanted to ask was about Best Start guidelines and whether they were still in development stage or how.
So the guidelines themselves will not, they're not on the horizon to change at the moment, because that requires ministerial endorsement to do so. However, the handbook should be out next month. So the handbook on how to use improvement science has been really rejigged and really reflects the new way of Best Start. So that will be out shortly, and the portal guides will also be updated as well. So somebody else has really, because when I did those, it was, as I was doing them, it was kind of like in response to each addition to the portal, and it wasn't really coherent. So the person, we've had MCRI kind of overhaul the portal guides as well. So they'll, the new portal guides should be out next month too. So hopefully those two things together will be quite helpful starting point. So
that'd be great.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Maybe we'll go to Barwin now.
Hello.
Hey.
So I guess from City of Greater Geelong's Best Start site, we have been trying to this year look at our logic model being more concise, so that our measures are meaningful. So we had our partnership meeting a couple of weeks ago and just discussed the need to look at exactly what we want to measure and really reducing it down to just a couple of measures, and then making sure that we have some specific percentages that we're wanting to work towards, so then we can use the graphs to see those run charts, to start to do run charts and to see how we're improving. So we're probably at that early stage at the moment. Yeah, and seem to be tracking along okay in that process.
Yeah, great. That's good.
At the moment, Motherwell Aboriginal Cooperative's going through a restructure, and we're figuring out whether or not separating the Aboriginal representatives from the co-hosted partnership meeting with the City of Greater Geelong is actually working, considering the person that advocated for that has now resigned as our ECG chair.
Okay.
Although I think it would be definitely beneficial to have that group of Aboriginal representatives continue to meet. I think maybe co-hosting could be beneficial for the partnership and engagement of the partners.
Just to give other people some context, I think you guys are in a very challenging position in that you are only focused in the Geelong area. One's an Aboriginal Best Start site, one's a mainstream site. So you're effectively kind of overlapping in your cohorts, and you're certainly overlapping in partners, but you run the risk if you have a partnership that's blended because a lot of the services are operated out of City of Greater Geelong, that you can have a very centric kind of partnership that may dominate the Aboriginal partnership because there's a whole lot of key players. We can't have that, obviously. We need to ensure that equity is there, and that we are really mindful of ensuring the Aboriginal voices are heard at the table, and that people are feeling the partnership meetings are culturally safe, and those kinds of things. It can be a real challenge when a lot of the partners come from one organisation, which happens to be government. And so it's a really complex situation that you guys are finding yourself in. And I don't think it's probably fair to say we haven't landed it yet at all. But it's around, in the interest of improvement, it's around really trying to work out, just trying new things to see what is going to actually be best for your communities, and having a restructure at the moment in Weatherburn probably isn't helping that situation.
Well, actually, it is and it isn't. So I've been very fortunate starting in the Best Start space that our family services manager, my manager, has been a Best Start facilitator. Unfortunately, she's resigned and she'll be leaving on the 10th of March. But we're fortunate in that we're developing an early years network within Watherong and that sort of thing. And the restructure is really working collaboratively throughout our services, rather than, oh, that's health services, they do that. That's early years, they do that. That's, sort of passing the buck in regards to, oh, we have to close on these families, that next service will pick them up, or oh, I shouldn't refer because, I can help them here. Sometimes when it'd be more beneficial to be helped in another area. Mm-hmm. So in that, I suppose, continuity of support and service for individual families and children, it's pretty exciting, especially having the early years network starting up.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
So have you got any measures that you're particularly focusing in on from your partnership's perspective at this stage, or not yet?
Well, Barwon Health has an Aboriginal ear health regional meeting, and they have a plums and hats tool, and they're looking at focusing on, because so ear health issues are prevalent in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, and their children are looking at being, through maternal child health, put in as a risk factor for hearing issues. So getting a referral to the audiologist in a new centre that's starting up that will have better access to parking, it's closer, that sort of thing. So there'll be a referral at the 2 weeks key ages and stages, and then another one at 8 month key ages and stages to have those children's hearing checked. We'll monitor how many referrals are made, and we'll also monitor what further action has come from those referrals. So we don't have much data on, how it's been before for our baseline data, but we are trying to put in place measures that will give us a very good understanding of what's happening.
Awesome.
So, and then there are some tools that will look at the plums and hats one through our play groups and Triple P and that sort of thing, maybe even our Aboriginal health checks and what have you.
Excellent. That's good. Awesome. Maybe Glen Waverley now, and then we'll go to Footscray and then to Bendigo.
Hi.
Okay.
I'll be really, really quick. Most people have, already mentioned lots and lots of things that are relevant for Yarra Rangers and our work as well. So, but it's been really helpful to hear that sharing of experiences between other facilitators. So thank you for that. In relation to some of the learnings from last year, specifically around our logic model, was we again scaled down our geographic focus areas. So I just came back into the role again last year as well. So still getting my head around everything and setting it up for the new year as well in the portal. So we're just having, instead of a large area to focus on, we're scaling it down to around 4 communities. So looking forward to really doing some targeted, more intensive work with the services within those communities.
And Yarra Rangers has always had that as a challenge. Like I remember the very first logic model that was kind of developed, and I think it was focusing in on 4 short-term outcome areas and really huge breadth of work. And so I think it is another challenge when you have a partnership that's traditionally wanted to focus on such a large scope to try and understand the value of that smaller focus.
Yeah. And trying to bring the partnership along on that journey as well. Again, similar to what someone else said, it's kind of like, but we want to do stuff for everyone, for everywhere, and there's need everywhere, isn't there?
Absolutely.
But, you just can't do it. Like, this is our little piece of work that we can do, and so what can we do really, really well? So looking at the data, we identified those 4 areas and had conversations with the partnership as well around those. In saying that, there's still 21 early childhood education centres within that to engage with. So some of those haven't really been involved in the past, so we're establishing some new relationships there, and some have been as well. So really excited about doing that, and we find that it is those establishing those relationships which is key, particularly key in terms of surveys. And yeah, we're still going to continue those this year, but there might be, say 1 round of surveys, there might be one area that's focused on. In the next round of surveys, we might focus on a different area, that sort of thing, so that those, particularly for the families, I think it's really interesting to continue to gather information from services, and the stories and the themes and stuff that have come out from those surveys are really interesting to look at. But I think for families, we don't want to just be asking them every 4 times a year to complete surveys. So we're just going to rotate what services, supported play groups, that sort of thing, that get surveyed when. A big thing that I'd love to start looking at, and I know some sites already are, was rather than just looking at enrolment data, was to actually start tracking attendance data, and particularly around ESK children as well. So it's been really good to hear what other sites are doing this year. And looking at what other local data, just setting up what other local data do we want to collect that's really, really relevant to our logic model, and keeping that small as well. We don't have any central enrolment at Yarra Rangers, so gathering some of that data can be a bit tricky, and also there's a bit of a block, it seems, at the moment on some MCH data coming through, so really trying to figure out how we can start to get some of that. We were getting monthly data last year from them, key age and stage participate attendance data. So hopefully that can continue this year, but just working through those challenges. And looking forward to being able to put monthly data up on the portal. Hopefully we can set up our dashboard to be really a bit more exciting and interesting to look at, and I think that monthly data will do that. And again, what a lot of other people have mentioned was at partnership meetings, having not so much up there having a data showcase, but just having a lot more information sharing, hearing from other services about what's happening for families and services out there on the ground. And I like the idea of what some people are doing with little data snapshots and things like that, to show people, to keep them engaged. But that's probably a lot of what we've learned from last year.
Yeah, excellent. That's good. All right, go to Footscray.
Hi, this is Lyndall from Wyndham. I think being towards the end, a lot of the information that we've heard already
for me, it's exactly how I've been feeling and what I've been working towards as well. I've definitely, I've been in the role for 12 months now, so I've definitely learned a lot last year, and that, you know, it's definitely been around trying to really look at our measures and really collecting meaningful measurements that really reflect the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. We're looking at, from our logic model, we're looking at referral processes and trying to build that collaboration, which, you know, we've mentioned before, talking today around how do we measure that. And I know, I think it was Leah from Casey is trying to measure that too. The way that we're looking at measuring it is getting, you know, MCH playgroup facilitators and kinder staff to look at their interactions over a monthly period and just track that, to then look at a pattern and building on, you know, encouraging further collaboration between services, particularly when they're, you know, co-located at the same community centre. So that's what we're looking
to see how successful that data collection is. Like, I think that's a PSA in its own right, you know what I mean, in terms of whether they find that too cumbersome, for instance, and they might not maintain that, or, you know, it'll just be, it's really interesting to see how that goes.
So I haven't developed a tool for that yet, so I'll be doing that very shortly. But yeah, having that in the back of my mind as to keeping it as simple, and then how do I introduce that to them? So I've introduced it to their team managers at the moment, team leaders, but then having the conversation with the actual staff who will be, you know, collecting that data and how is it useful, and giving them feedback during the year, and, you know, tracking that changes with them. And I think for me last year it was all about building the relationships with the key stakeholders and people who I'm working with, and who will, you know, I'll be, you know, working with to develop PDSAs as well. So so that, you know, that this sort of data collection is something new for us. We didn't try it like that last year. And in terms of referrals, tracking, you know, where referrals are coming from. So MCH, that seems to be an issue collecting that data because they don't formally collect that data. A lot of their referrals are parents ringing up. So that might be a bit hard. But from supported play groups and kinder, including early start, this is data they're already collecting. So utilising that, and then that goes across other, you know, attendance data that we'll be collecting as well. And, you know, using data that they've already got. So I've had those conversations, and it's a matter of, how do we collect it, developing a spreadsheet for them to enter the data into. So, so still in the progress of, getting all that documented and putting it into the schema, but getting there.
That's the thing.
It's such a busy start to the year.
Exactly, and the portal stuff is always going to be a challenge, and particularly when, like, because you only do it annually, so you kind of, even if you have done it before, you kind of forget what you did last time and how it works and all that sort of stuff. So really encourage the use of the demo site if people want to, and if you need to have the schema deconfirmed so you can play around in it, just giving MCRI a call so that they can do that for you, because I think it's, you don't want to have to mess up your own site. It's easy to mess up the demo site, and then, you know, take your learnings, because it's a challenge, and because, as I said, because you only do it annually, you know, getting your head back in that space is a big challenge for everybody.
But in terms of the surveys, really looking at those questions, and I've spent a lot of time, and we've already had one partnership meeting this year, to looking at the data and how we're collecting and getting feedback from the partners as well. That has really, you know, helped a lot in developing measures, developing survey questions, just so they're meaningful, and literally it is only to do with the logic model, and trying to make them more specific around, you know, what sort of answers that we're looking for. I found last year the questions were too broad, and that they were giving me, I haven't got time. I would like longer consultation time, things that I can't change.
Exactly.
So, definitely more specific with the survey questions.
Yeah,
even last year, I found the surveys really quite useful for generating the PDSA cycles.
Exactly. That's where I think that they are so handy and they have such value, particularly if you have free text questions, because it also really reinforces, when you're talking community surveys particularly, you're really reinforcing the community voice and the importance of it. So when people are providing feedback and they're seeing the changes in practice actually happening on the back of that feedback, then that shows that they're actually valued. And I think that's something that you guys have really found in this community, because what people are saying is what is taken to the services, and so they're basing their changes in practice on what families are actually saying. So it's huge, I think, and I think that is where it's really helpful to continue the survey collection, particularly around those free text questions. I think they're really, really helpful.
In terms of the partnership, just getting more buy-in from them. I felt that last year, my first year in the role, people around the room used it as a networking opportunity, which it definitely is, but getting them more involved in the work around the logic model and what we're trying to achieve and what they can bring from their services as well. So, our meeting in January was just around really getting an understanding, developing a working together agreement around what they can bring to the meeting, what we can do together, and what their expectations are of me as well. So I think just setting up those boundaries right at the beginning, and having more group discussions. I've heard people talk about that, smaller group discussions rather than as a whole group. I think we did try that at the end of last year, and it has made an impact, I think, and getting those people who don't usually talk at the meeting more of an opportunity to share their ideas.
Because you do often have that really dominant voice. That can overtake the conversation, really change the direction of a partnership. And it might not necessarily be the consensus, but it's loudest voice.
So balancing all of that as well. So
great.
Another big learning, I think, this year is coming up.
Absolutely.
That's all for me.
So I think I concurred with Shona, and I know other sites have said the same thing, but just this year in developing our program logic, ensuring our stretch goals are really measurable, and linking them directly then to our monthly measures. So last year we also looked at registrations for ESK, and we had really great increase in those registrations, but then are those children actually turning up and regularly attending? So similar to Brimbank, we're also looking at how are ESK children attending kinder, and not just ESK kids, but then the year before school ESK who would have been either eligible or accessed ESK last year. So that's going to be a focus in terms of working with our early childhood education and care services. And then with MCH, we're looking at continuing to look at our 3.5 CAS participation, because there was some really great work done last year, so to sort of continue that on. And we had in Maribyrnong, we had quite a significant decrease in the 4-month CAS check. So we're going to be focusing on the do not attend rates and participation rates for the 4-month CAS check. Just a few people mentioned the development of promotional tools and ESK flyers or postcards. So just a couple of examples we used last year. We developed an ESK postcard. And a couple of PDSAs, we tracked the impact of that using that postcard aligned to our MCH and central enrolment cross-checking data. And where in the CEDAS data, we identified kids who were eligible but not yet enrolled. We sent out that postcard with a bit of a blurb about ESK, and we had really great results from that. So we had a number of people calling up and booking in and saying, I didn't even realise, I was eligible. So that was a really good way to
test the effectiveness of that tool.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, we were distributing them to partners and all the rest, but it was hard to track what impact is that actually having. So we also got nurses to use, just at a couple of MCH centres, we got them to use that postcard at the 2-year-old check and use it as a talking point, because that's when they do start to have the conversation around kinder. Use that as a talking point to, to identify those kids who might be eligible.
That's great. I love hearing that, because it's the perfect example of how you can use a resource in the Best Start context.
Yeah.
It isn't just, because otherwise how do you measure the impact of what you're talking about? It's very specific use of the resource and measuring the impact of that. So it's brilliant to hear. It's really
good. And we're our MCH are looking to do some Facebook posts and developing a 3.5 poster to then put out into kindergarten. So we're going to work with the admin team to, when they get phone calls of booking 3.5 appointments, getting them to ask what prompted you to make the phone call. So then we'll be able to track that, and that might just be over a 4-week period.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's it. Perfect.
So one thing I guess I continue to struggle with is, and other sites have mentioned the same thing, I guess when there's PDSA ideas that are really great and somehow connect into the program logic but won't specifically link to a monthly measure. But ensuring that we're highlighting, the successes or how it hasn't worked with the partnership group. So even though you're presenting, okay, these are our 4 monthly measures, how do we still highlight the work that's working towards that, but not maybe directly linking in, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think there's a place for sharing PDSAs in general and successes. I think the really important thing is to demonstrate that it's fairly easy to do PDSA work, or it should be. If it's not, then we're probably pitching it too high as a level. And celebrating the success of those really easy changes is important. And I think just going back a step from a facilitator's perspective, meeting people where they're at is really, really important. And so if someone's willing to do a PDSA that doesn't align to your logic model, we don't want you to say, no, you're not going to do that, because it's much better to get them to do a PDSA and then worry about aligning it to the improvement science stuff later than to not have any engagement at all. So I think, and you want to be able to celebrate it. And I think from your perspective, it's around creating the narrative that's closest enough to the measures, you know what I mean? And so, maybe, but I think, that is a challenge. And I'm not certain, if people have other suggestions on that in terms of how you guys have done it. Actually, I'm a little bit reluctant to open it up that question at the moment because I'm conscious of time. So maybe we'll just, maybe that's something that we can discuss though. Maybe in our next meeting, we can sort of make a note to have a think about how we are actually, letting others know about the learnings from PDSAs and how we value that, even if it's not quite aligned. So yeah, okay, excellent. Is that it from you guys? Yeah. All right. So the last, I think Jamie might be on the line. I'm just not certain. So I'll give her a second just to jump in.
Sure.
Yeah.
Don't forget Frankston here. Morning.
Oh, of course, I haven't got Frankston either. Let's not forget. You guys got like 50 people in the room. Okay. Well, maybe while waiting for Jamie, we'll go to you guys in Frankston.
Okay.
Steph first. Okay. So I've been in the Best Start position. I've been seconded to the role since Easter last year. So from Frankston. So thanks, Susie. So it's been quite a steep learning curve for me. We've just tweaked our logic model, and listening to some of the conversations, I wonder if I need to tweak it again. I guess last year there wasn't an awful lot of data collecting around monthly measures, and that's something that I'm really focused on this year. I felt that whilst I was certainly part of the Best Start partnership before I came into the facilitator role, and I helped to develop the program logic and whatnot. When I was sitting in the, I don't know, the driver's seat, the facilitator role, I kind of looked at it and thought, how am I going to measure that? I can't measure those sorts of, it was all more about feelings and how people, I found that really difficult to measure. But listening to Leah talk about how services connect, I think it was, and the questions that she sent out to those services, I'm really interested to tap into Leah and just hear what those questions are and whatnot. So Leah, if you can hear that, I'll contact you. Yeah, I'm really interested to hear about the surveys too, how one facilitator collected surveys from the services first and third term, and then the parents second and fourth term. I think that's a really good idea. And also listening to everyone, I think I've asked too many questions on the service surveys, so I'll probably have to retweak that. So deconfirm that schema again.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think there's anything else. Last year we did a little bit of tweaking with the partnership, and there's and that's been quite successful. But again, it's getting Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander voice representation on the Best Start partnership. I'm finding that a bit tricky, and I've done some really great relationship building, I feel, with some of our Aboriginal services. But yeah, it's jumping in and asking that question and getting that buy-in as well, because let's be honest, I feel that everybody wants to hear from like the board at our gathering place, which is fantastic and it's so important, but I realise how pressed they are for time as well, and they have got, their own work to do, and
exactly,
I get it. So, but yeah, otherwise I think I'm treading water really nicely.
Excellent, that's good.
Yeah. Mornington?
I'll start from Mornington Peninsula Shire, and then I'll hand over to Kate, our new facilitator. She can probably, I think we've had an amazing opportunity with a new facilitator coming in to have a look with fresh eyes and see gaps that we may not have seen. But before I start that, what I'd firstly like to acknowledge as an Aboriginal woman is the enormity attached to, I can't remember your name, sorry, but moving away from Michelle, moving away from cultural safety into learning. That is just the best thing I've heard, I think, in 56 years. It makes my heart shine, and it just keeps, it's just such a rewarding thing. It's just so amazing to hear that. So I'm just honoured to have been able to sit here and listen to that and know that that's the journey we are on. Down on the peninsula, and hopefully we can get to that stage too. So yeah, I just want to really applaud that. That's amazing work.
That's amazing.
Yeah. That's
really exciting.
That's closing that gap, and I'm like, good on ya.
So when we read those messages from the parents, because we surveyed them, my manager and I sat there and just went, we're kind of in shock, like.
Yeah.
And we're like, this is bloody brilliant. Because every comment under cultural safety was actually Aboriginal education within the program. So we're like, this is awesome. So yeah, it's amazing.
It is awesome. So I've got to be honest and say that since I heard that, that's all I've been thinking about, I think. But just briefly from where we've come from. So we've been sitting in the ESK space for probably, we've had a 3-year journey there, starting with looking at data intensely, then looking at education and awareness, getting the CUS training. Oh, that's another idea I loved. So with our CUS training, and we've worked really closely with Frankston, we've got a partnership across the 2 municipalities so that we're doing the same but different because we're place-based. Out of the CUS training, we started doing yarning circles across the 2 municipalities with our Kesso Shiloh, who's amazing. And we're now to a point with them where we're full, like there's full attendance all the time now, so that's really great. That's happened for the last year and a half, I think. Where we're moving to this year, and this will help with Georgina, is we're looking to be more place-based with the yarning circles, so having them out at our 2 local gathering places, our Aboriginal gathering places, so that we can hear directly from the organiser, the gathering place, how important those places are for our families, and the educators can see what a gathering place looks like, the important work that's done there, and what cultural safety looks like. So that's where we're heading to. We have been tracking attendance for ESK, so not just registration but attendance. And then if we rate it, and if it is rated below fair or poor, we have a system in place for if it's one of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families, we get our CESO engaged and involved. And if it's one of our families experiencing vulnerabilities with child protection or other agency, we've got Lookout involved. So that's working well. But the amazing Kate, we have been doing this for maybe 2 years, I think, or two years, I think. And I don't think that we're doing it enough. So we're looking nearer the end of the term to engage for the next term. But if you're disengaged, say in week 2, we're not actually having the conversation until week 8. So we've got a system in place where an email goes out to the kinders, and the kinders respond back with their rating system for the families that are ESK, but I think we're not doing it near enough. So that's what we'll be moving towards this year as well. So that's really great pick up from Kate and the feedback that I've been hearing today.
Can I just jump in on, because the changing the form idea where you guys asked the barriers to participation before the year started, I think that's a good one to share at this point in time too, just as a change in practice that was really effective, because it wasn't about when people had disengaged, so it wasn't from a shame-based perspective, it's coming from a support perspective. So
we've got a kinder teacher, there's probably 2 or 3 now that have implemented this, that during their kinder interviews with the parents, they actually talk about barrier questions, which are basically saying to parents and having that discussion, you know, what if you're sick 1 week and you need to get your child to kinder? How can we make sure that your child still gets here? Or, you know, one of your other children is sick and, you know, you can't, it's a struggle, you know, to get your child to kinder, or the car breaks down, or what can we do? So they actually put plans in place at the start of the year. So when a child is absent, they'd ring up and go, oh, do you remember when you might have been able to organise for Auntie Mary to drop your child at kinder? Remember we talked about that at the start of the year? But the reason why we do it at the start of the year is because, yeah, no shame, but also the kinder teacher's demonstrating to that family and that child how important that child is to the teacher, to the kinder, and coming every week. So it was really more around that, having those plans in place, because when you're stuck in the morning, you've got other sick kids and you think, I've got to get my child to kinder, often you're tired. It's trying to think of, oh God, well, I just won't take them today because we're all you know, stuffed. But if we can have those backup plans in place.
And it shows that the teachers care too.
Really shows the teachers care.
Care and that, you know, it is important that your child actually attends kindergarten without actually saying, why didn't your child attend kindergarten? Yes. Because, you know that 15 hours is really important, and research shows and all that sort of stuff. It's coming just from that care perspective. I think it's a really nice, very small change in practice, but it's a really good one to start the year off with, because it just then allows those conversations to be a little bit easier when you ultimately do have to have them. If there is a non-attendance kind of issue, it doesn't necessarily have to come from a shame perspective. We know that can be a really significant impact for Aboriginal families particularly.
Definitely. And we actually had, so from doing those barrier questions at the start of the year with every family, what was really good was it kind of built the relationship up quicker between the kinder teacher and the parent. And when the parent and the child didn't turn up for kinder, there was more like the families didn't feel
shame
and judged. Like they knew their kinder teacher cared about them, and that's why she called to see what she could do to support them. She or he. So it is a good one.
So yeah, just thought it would
Sorry.
be helpful to share that one.
Yeah, could we have a look at those barrier questions? Could we get a copy of those? That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, thanks.
I think our biggest, one of our biggest pieces for this year in our supported playgroup space is trying to pick up our numbers, our referral numbers, and then turn them into attendance and then regular attendance. We're looking, if we're looking at our data just from an MCH perspective, there are over 900 children attending, or enrolments, should I say. We haven't been able to break that down yet into eligibility, but if we're looking at that amount of over 1,000, is it?
I think it's 9,000.
9,000, not 900, sorry. We should have waiting lists at our supported playgroups instead of sitting with vacancies. So we've got to really explore that. I think what we need to really start doing is having that critical reflection and asking the questions and not doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So yeah, that's where we're at. Kate, did you want to add anything?
Look, not a huge amount, because obviously it's only been 6 weeks, so I'm really, still very much finding my feet and trying to wrap my head around Best Start, the outcomes, going into more depth around the program logic and just understanding what has been done and what's worked really well last year and how we can build and continue building on those strengths. And I think, a lot of the last 6 weeks has been relationship based for me. So obviously, trying to start getting to know my teammates within obviously the Shire, education and care, and also maternal and child health, but then our partners too. So we had our first partnership meeting for the year last Monday, which I think was good. It was great to meet everyone. A few people I'd met previously at network meetings, and I think trying to understand the role each of our organisations play in Best Start, where our level of influence is, understanding the strengths of different organisations and perhaps where the limitations are. And I don't know, someone was talking about, scratching each other's back, it might have been Kylie, but where we can support each other to improve outcomes for our children and families. So I think, certainly going on from what Susie's talked about with supported playgroup, it's a really big focus for us this year. So I'm doing a fair bit of work with our team there's a lot of data about supported playgroup already in existence. So trying to understand that in greater detail, and we're obviously measuring referrals into supported playgroup and measuring attendance, but is there some data that we can be sharing and more regularly? I love the monthly measurements. We've been talking about more regular measurements within the team, stuff that we can share more regularly with maternal and child health and other partners, and to create a bit more of a compelling case, I think, for supported playgroup. There are so many different playgroups in the region, and all have slightly different probably target groups, or using some of the questionnaire information that's already in Kim's and sharing that more broadly, so that we're getting some of that family voice and looking at some of the change that's already occurring, rather than it always being sort of a bums on seat conversation, and it just doesn't seem to be going anywhere. So lots to do. I'm very much in my infancy. It was really great. I did have a trip down to Gippsland and was able to participate in a network meeting down there, which I think was in about week 2.
Yep.
But it was terrific. So these sorts of experiences are just invaluable for me, and I've got a very full notebook here, and looking forward to continue to build relationships with everyone and be a part of it.
Excellent. I am conscious that it's 1 o'clock, so people have to leave because their rooms are otherwise booked. I do understand that, and I have been a terrible chairperson.
Sorry, Glenn Waverley, we have to leave our room.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. And I haven't, I've deliberately not kept things to time at this point in time, because I feel like the conversations are really important to have, and so as much as possible I've wanted to allow that to continue. So I'm conscious that we've still got Cardinia and Jamie in Bendigo on the line to still talk, and I wouldn't mind getting to that in just a second. I just want to touch on, and unfortunately I think they've gone, in Greensborough, Yeah, but Vaxel, I don't think are still here in Greensborough. I just wanted to touch on the supports that are available from Vaxel's perspective. So we've got, what will be happening is each of the Aboriginal Best Start sites will have their own work plan with the Vaxel project officers. However, in terms of support to the mainstream sites, what the support will mostly be around what will ultimately be the self-reflection tool for 2020. So the self-reflection tool this year is going to be more of an improvement plan. And so the idea will be you'll focus on 2 of the criteria. So the matrix will largely remain unchanged, but sites will actually focus on 2 criteria. One will be Aboriginal specific focus. So you'll choose from either partnership means of culturally safe or stronger engagement from Aboriginal organisations, because regardless of how well you're doing it, we know that people can do better. And so that's what we're looking at in that improvement mindset. So you'll choose from one of them. And then the other area that you'll focus on will just be another basically around improvement science, potentially, or partnership engagement, whatever you feel like you'd like to focus on at your particular site. So that's what we're looking at, sort of switching the improvement, the self-reflection tool to a much more of an improvement plan. So you'll just be identifying 2 areas that you want to focus on and then working toward that toward the end of, to try and achieve that by the end of the year. So we'll obviously have more information on that in coming days, but Vaxel will certainly be available for phone and email support around, in the first instance at least, around where that, those particular 2 criteria. So I just wanted to highlight that if you were still expecting Vaxel to get back to you in relation to face-to-face meetings, it probably won't happen now, because we've sort of flipped up the kind of support that we'd like to see happening. So that's sort of a department change. So just to be conscious of that, but they are absolutely available to provide that input into those particular parts of the self-reflection tool, which will now be an improvement plan. The other thing was that Leah had some driver diagram tools that she would like to share, so I'll also forward those out. And I also just wanted to highlight that if people have spoken about resources today and are able to forward those through, then I'll attach those to everybody. I'll send them out to everybody so that everyone else has access to those as well. So anything that you are prepared to share at this point in time would be greatly appreciated. So that was my updates from our perspective. If you've still got time to hang around, we'll still hear from Jamie and also Marie. So Marie, did you want to jump in first?
Sure. Yeah, it's been really interesting listening to what everybody else is doing, and something that I'm really keen to know more about is some of the measures that people have around ESK attendance. Our figures for last year for ESK enrolments were good, but we're very aware that that only tells part of the story. So I'm looking to try and confirm a monthly measure for ESK attendance. So I noted that Brimbank and Frankston had some information on that, so I'll follow that up afterwards. Yeah, just we're also finalising our logic model here, conscious in Cardinia of our growing called communities, given that Pakenham is an area that's taking people on safe haven visas. So that again is another measure, something that we want to tie in for engaging our called communities. Yeah, one thing that we're noting in terms of our processes, we've developed some really good relationships with maternal child health and our central registration officer. One thing that we're noting is that when families don't want to enrol in one of our sessional kinders, how we make sure that that information is captured by maternal child health and that family doesn't get lost in amongst the administration side of it. So that's something we're looking at the moment. I used surveys in the quarter to September last year, got some really good information, and we're looking at putting things in place from that. I haven't used the surveys every quarter because I'm conscious of overkill, but yeah, certainly it's given us some really good data to as a baseline to put things in place. So yeah, that's really us. Finding it really helpful. Still linking regularly with Leah and Casey and Callie and Dandenong. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Excellent, thank you. And Jamie, I think you are still online.
Hello?
Hey.
Hi. Can you see us?
Yes, we can.
Great. Sorry. So, yeah, we were just a little bit of a late start, but we have been here for the majority, so that's exciting. And I'll leave it to my facilitators here. And Mariah does have to scoot off for school pickup, so she's going to
Sorry about the lateness, everybody.
I am Mariah. I'm a Best Start facilitator in Echuca. So I've been now in my role for 9 months now. Last year was a bit crazy and a bit overwhelming as I came into the role with no understanding about Best Start, and I did not have an early years background. But that's all going to change. I'm going to do my Cert 3 in early childhood next month, which is really exciting. So last year there wasn't a lot of data or measures done, purely because I was just trying to figure out what my job role was in Echuca and as a Best Start facilitator. But that will be one of my main focuses. I know me and Jamie, we work really great together. And so that will be one of my main focuses, and also community and family engagement. Because we in Echuca have Barimba, majority of our Aboriginal children do access early start kinder and our 4-year-old kinder, which is bush kinder as well. But because of that, we provide services to ensure that our children are coming to kinder. And then we have, I think we might have at least 15 children who are going, that are accessing Shine Bright in Echuca as well. And they're children that have transitioned from early start kinder and bush kinder from Barimba into the mainstream Shine Bright. And we do use majority of the Shine Brights in Echuca, but we only access one, which is Echuca South, purely because they've come a long way with Aboriginal engagement, culture. They've really embraced that for our children. So we find it a very safe environment for our children to be there.
Yeah, I was just going to say that goes back to Kylie's point earlier around, do you do active outreach and engagement first, or you do the cultural safety? I think it really speaks volumes that when you, the active outreach and engagement becomes less important when the service is really culturally safe. So it's interesting to hear that that's reinforced there as well. Yeah, and I was really happy. I was really lucky to come into this role and have a very strong partnership from, we had a Echuca Shire, Echuca Regional Health, and also we have the manager, Shirley, who oversees all the Shine Brights within the Shire capacity. So they've been absolutely fantastic and they've been amazing to work with. We also have Shire, and we also have the Shire Tube, enrolment registration. So they come every Best Start meeting and tell us how our kids are going enrolments and just all that stuff. But majority, we had our first Best Start last week on the 20th, which was amazing. So obviously this focus too is school readiness. We've found that our children, because majority of our children access Barimba, it's where I'm based, we found that there is a huge gap for our kids going from Barimba to prep.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we're working on as well.
Yes. So we had an internal evaluator to talk to families, school, Barimba, and talk about the transition agreements amongst Barimba and whoever else is involved to ensure our children have smooth transitions from Barimba or 4-year-old kinder into school, because we found that there's a massive gap. None of it is, we kind of have a great sense that our majority of our children are vulnerable and how we can best support that. So we had the Kezos involved. We had Sky wasn't there. Jamie and Angela came. We had Shine Bright, and we had Shire Capacity, and we had Echuca Regional Health to come there and to get on board of what we're trying to achieve here this year. So 2020 we will be doing 4 workshops, and hopefully this year too we're also wanting to engage with the schools and with the principals.
So I know and I understand that Rachel told me that not a lot of Best Start facilities have actually accessed the primary school because of the CESO workers, but we found that there's a huge gap. We have a great support in Barimba. We have a great KPSA who's fantastic, who engages with all Shine Bright and all the educators. But we find that there's a bit of a gap there with our children accessing or moving into prep because Barimba is a very culturalised, familiar, safe place. And when we deal with our vulnerable children, they tend to struggle going into school. So how can we best support our children slowly making that transition to school? And we need to start building those relationships with principals and the teachers. And it also needs to come both ways. You need to come to Barimba, we can come to your school. You know, it kind of all need to be transparent throughout the whole service or education services. Yeah, so that's great. Hopefully it goes well. Awesome. Yeah, so yeah, that's what I'm doing.
It's exciting. Nice.
I'm going to have to check out your stuff that you're doing because I might steal some ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
the exact same thing. Yeah.
It would be great. I'm actually really excited. This kind of gives me a great foundation exactly what I want to do this year in terms of PDSAs and measurements. And one of the biggest things is also having our families engaged more, whether that be holding information sessions and giving our families the right information on how we can talk up the importance of school. Our children's not going to feel safe if the parents are safe walking into a school environment, and our teachers, you know, it has to be, our families have to feel it along with our children. So it's everyone's job to do what we need to do and what we want to achieve. So hopefully 2021 we'll have a great understanding of what that process will look like. Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it. Right. Thank you. Well, you go. Sorry, ladies. No. Thanks so much. Thank you. We'll have to keep in touch, and yes. For sure.
That's really good.
No worries.
And Mariah's meeting with Vaxel next week on Wednesday.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mariah.
Thank you. See you. Bye.
Hi, I'm Merrin and I'm one of the facilitators at Central Goldfields and based at the Maryborough District Health Service. So I've been there since mid-January and this is my job share person.
I'm Shelley and I started 3 weeks ago in the HS job sharing with Merrin. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're really new and we are just working our way through all the information in the portal, and we're going to have a refocus this year. So we're sort of snapshotting what happened up until the end of last year, and then we would like to refocus this year with new initiatives. So
yeah, great.
But this has been great.
I think it's an interesting situation for you guys. I think because your partnerships were very complex, or when I looked at the Best Start work that was done there last year, it was really, really complex, and it had to sit in a number of other kind of initiatives that were happening in the area and that kind of thing. So it looked very broad, and as someone removed from your partnership, when I read the logic model, I was really confused, and it'll be interesting to see whether that's what you maintain this year, that level of complexity, or whether or not, you know, you do ultimately kind of land at a much more narrow focus. And I guess particularly when you're rebuilding, I think the narrow focus is obviously the way, like, you know, it makes most sense. Depends though, because sometimes you can't get your partnership on board to do that, but it'll be really interesting to see how that all plays out for you guys, because it is absolutely challenging.
We're thinking that it might be a lot more focused this year, the Best Start initiatives within the broader partnership. Yeah.
That's really encouraging to hear, because I just think that will help enormously. It is a less is more kind of idea on this one, particularly I think when you're rebuilding completely. If you can get some really great wins, then you can build up next year potentially. I think we don't have to be too concerned about rushing to the line. I think sometimes we have that.
And that's what Jamie said. That's great.
I think the other thing that's important to note around their situation is that although it was quite complex, they still need, so there was a group operating early years focus called Go Goldfields, and they were doing a lot of theory of change work, which hypothetically involved plan, do, study, act cycles, but we couldn't clearly find any, and then Best Start was trying to do them, and then so it got very muddled. So I think what we want is we still want that collaboration and that relationship to maintain itself, because we will need Go Goldfields to work together with us to achieve all the outcomes for the early years. But also we wanted Best Start to now have just more autonomy, to be able to say, we're happy to be here, we're happy to give you a Best Start update of the partnership, this is what's going on, and really downsizing a bit, and then being clear and separating out what's Best Start and what's Go Goldfields, and then having an invitation to partners, if they want to do more in-depth Best Start improvement work, that they're welcome to work in working groups or contact Maren and Shelley and
that sounds brilliant.
So that's what we're thinking for the moment. But we don't want to break that relationship with the Go Goldfields in a way that we can't work alongside each other. So that's been
exactly
that level of complexity and choosing the wording and the steps quite wisely. We're close.
Yeah, and I think it's already February, like it's silly March, and to try and achieve a lot before the end of the year, you wouldn't get any traction. So I think that really narrow focus, I think, will really help you if you're able to.
Yeah, so our first partnership meeting is tomorrow. And the good timing for us is that we're both new. There's a new worker coming on board with Go Goldfields. Right. The maternal and child health coordinator's new. There's a lot of new people, and so we feel like we've arrived at this space at the same time. So
good opportunity to, establish some different working practices and boundaries and that parallel working relationship. So I think it's exciting.
Yeah, that's really good. Excellent. Well, good luck with it all. I do apologise because we have gone way over time, and when we were originally setting these up, there was concern from Central that I was going to schedule them for 3 hours, and I'm like, I don't reckon that's going to be enough, but we'll see what happens. And but I think it's really important to hear from everybody and really understand everybody's challenges. So I know I'm kind of dwindled in numbers now, but I think it's really important to hear these conversations, because I know I learn an enormous amount on things that people can potentially try at their sites. So when I'm talking with other sites, I'm able to share that. But I think all facilitators seem to really appreciate that as well. So just wanted to thank you all very much for your contributions today, and we do have another one scheduled. I can't remember when the next one is scheduled for. I think next month we're looking more at having the innovation network meetings again, and then the following month should be the Best Start forum. So we believe the forum is going to happen in the last week of April, so just after Anzac Day. That will be the statewide forum. If that doesn't happen for some reason, then we'll probably just slot in one of these meetings instead in that last week of April, just so we're still maintaining that connection, and then we'll reschedule the forum for another time. Otherwise, I think the next one of these meetings isn't scheduled until May. So, but we'll work out, but I'll also send out a survey, of course, to get some feedback from you guys around how you'd like these sessions to work and what we can do better for next one as well. So, but really appreciate, given the limitations of WebEx, it is very challenging, but really appreciate everybody's willingness to contribute today. It's been much appreciated from my perspective, and I'm sure from other facilitators' perspectives. So, thank you very much. No time for other questions really, but thanks very much for all of your time. So yeah.